Welcome to Takeaways, Life Lessons Learned. Jim Stuart, at long last.
Don't start with that look on your face.
No?
Though.
All right.
No.
I'll put my serious intro look on. Here we go.
All right.
Jim Stuart is currently a partner at Matter Real Estate Group. You officially became an entrepreneur in 1994. Feel free to fact check any of this because it came off the internet. I understand you've been involved in 5 major ventures. They include commercial real estate brokerage, project management, development, and home appliances. And if we want to go all the way back, we can add hospitality to the list.
Hospitality.
I understand your first business was running a Kool-Aid stand in your neighborhood
Indeed.
at the ripe age of 8.
And if my memory serves me, I'd say about 8, yes. Yeah. Well constructed. Took a loan from my father. Bought my own supplies.
Oh, serious?
Hired
Like
neighborhood
serious?
kids. Yeah, did the whole thing.
Nice.
Yeah, I was not very bright back then.
Would that be hospitality? I put that in
I think so.
hospitality. Okay.
I think it was entrepreneurial. I was figuring if I could sell lemonade to passerbys in a car. And to this day, though, I will say I honor kids that are out doing it, and I always stop because I feel like I was that guy, or that kid.
You give him a 20, I imagine.
I'm generous.
So you graduated from UNLV?
Yes.
So did I.
Yeah.
Yeah, your
Go
degree
Reds.
is in business administration and management, general. That's what it says. Is that
Maybe I just wasn't smart enough to get a specific discipline. So general sounds pretty good. Yeah.
I guess well-rounded.
I have no idea what
Mine
that
was in
means.
marketing.
Okay.
I had the same
Yeah.
thing, marketing.
Okay.
So on a personal level, you're a family man, a marathoner, an Ironman, a global adventure seeker. We were talking earlier, your next trip is to Thailand and Bali. You're into fishing, cycling, skiing, horses. That's because of your daughters, or do you get on the horse too?
I will, but they won't let me on their horse. I actually, I really feel like a man about the world as you describe it. It sounds better coming from you.
Yeah, there's more.
Okay. All
You're
right.
a wino, big into wine.
I like to drink wine, but I wouldn't consider myself an expert at anything.
All right. Are you an expert in corn dogs and soft serve ice cream?
Well, now we've hit my swim lane.
Here we
right there.
go.
Yeah. Now I have some real value to add.
Corn dogs.
It just became folklore with my family, and I think Dan Doherty might actually have been responsible. And he was, Dan's very passionate about food, and so on one of my trips to Disneyland with the kids and his kids, and he made this unbelievable, passionate plea that we must stop at the end of Main Street to get their corn dogs, and somehow my young kids at that time, never let it go, and so I just run with it. And so corn dogs. Wherever we go around the world, I try and find corn dogs, and now everyone wants me to have soft serve, and it's a problem.
But I've heard you once in like a group setting give a technical definition or explanation of what makes good soft serve.
Yeah.
Am I remembering that right or
I
no?
don't think so.
No.
No,
So what's the soft serve passion?
it's
Same as the corn dog?
Yeah, it originated
You had me
somewhere.
snowed this whole time.
Look, we have to make ourselves interesting. Why not corn dogs and soft serve? Yeah.
All right.
And it just you find it everywhere, so it makes it particularly soft serve. And we go to Europe or other countries, and as soon as you see some indication of soft serve, my kids are, Dad, let's go. That's your thing. Well, it's actually kind of their thing, but it became my thing.
I see. It's their thing that it's your thing, so they make it a thing.
I don't know. It's kids.
It's kids.
They're adults now, but they still push.
All right. Well, those were my words.
Okay.
So over to you. Tell us in your own words, who are you and what do you do?
Well, work in progress. Here's what I could say, Hayim. As we kind of move into this, let me turn the script for a moment and just say, why am I even here? Like many others, I have plenty of things to do. But let me say, I have such admiration and respect for what you're doing with this podcast and your work and your leadership in the community, and just getting out there and trying to make your own impact, whatever that might mean for you. And I think in many ways we're very similar in that sense, that I'm constantly looking for other places where I can make a contribution. That wasn't the younger version of me. That's the more grade version of me. So I admire everything you're doing, and that's why I'm here, is to pay respect for your work, not mine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome, and you deserve it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, can we talk about you?
Okay. Yeah.
So professionally, how would you describe what you do?
Curious.
So work in progress, curious. I'm starting to get the
Yeah,
picture.
particularly at this chapter. So I think it's really, it's situational to where I am in my life. The young version of me, I would say probably like many others, I was in pursuit of, material gain. I wanted, the car, the things, the reputation, the credibility, the respect, the admiration, a lot of empty pursuits, but you have to travel that path to understand that those very things that I think we've been conditioned to believe create fulfillment and an enriched life. Once you achieve some things, you can really have a context to realize it's not what it's held out to be. So, younger self, and when I was partnered with Mike Mixer, we were driven. We were driven to create, success, which we measure by wealth through professional achievements, what have you. My middle, let's put it into 3 chapters. My middle chapter, after I sold everything.
First chapter is material pursuits.
Yeah, young, enthusiastic, naive would be a good descriptor, but ambitious. And I think if anything, I certainly was willing to put in the time and the energy to find, my place. And I was very fortunate in this town to be mentored, or at least in the presence of some, really inspired contributors to this community, civic leaders, developers, people that made such a great impact on my life. And I felt I was given a tutorial and a privilege in Las Vegas to be accepted. Coming from the Bay Area in San Francisco, I often joked I would be carrying someone's bag in my 30s. And out here, I'm sitting in boardrooms with, the people that were making decisions about the direction of this city and this state in some cases. And I never lost sight that was a real privilege and a gift. So that, as that chapter kind of went through, and then, kind of through the Centra days, then my children started growing up. And anyone who knows anything about me knows the importance of my family, the gift of being present in the 3 amazing, young women, ladies now, and being part of their life and taking them to school and being a dad, having a great relationship and a strong relationship with my wife now of 30 years, and being on that journey as parents and being able to explore the world with our girls. I mean, that was my singular focus. And same as the privilege of being mentored by some great men and women. In the case of the privilege of being part of my daughter's lives, that is something. I feel like I'm complete. I'm done. So this next chapter, the 3rd chapter, is more for me, if I'm to kind of be forced to think about it. And by me, just make sure that the work I'm doing gives me the proper opportunities to contribute in ways that perhaps I wouldn't have done. When you remove the goal of how do I provide for my family, how do I create wealth, how do I on and on, whatever individual pursuits are. For me, those were consistent. I feel like I have no pressure now, and I'm able to. I kind of when I was driving over here, I was listening to classic rock because I'm older, so that's actually current rock still to me. But I was, I kind of thought that, in some ways, I feel like that, that old vinyl album that maybe has been tucked away for too long, and you pull it out and dust it off, and you think, there's still probably a couple good songs in here that I haven't heard in a while, and that's metaphorically kind of how I feel like now. I think I have a couple good things left to do. We'll see.
All right. There's a lot there that we're going to touch on and tease out and understand a little more of before we move in that direction. You were born in California, I understand it.
I was.
And how did you make it to Las Vegas?
So it's a rather circuitous route. So my father literally was a rocket scientist, probably the greatest inspiration in my life. And I think a lot of the methodologies and the practicality of how I view the world, how I, my curiosity is one thing, but then to be methodical in how you question and pull it apart and find answers where otherwise it looks like it's confusing or abstract. That came from a scientific approach, listening to my father. And then my mother, she was also, a skilled nurse, went to Stanford. I had a father at Annapolis and went to UC Berkeley for aeronautical engineering. So there was big pressure. And I will say,
man, did you live up to it with your
no, not
UNLV
at all.
degree?
Look, it's well, there you are. So, look, I was not a great son. I will say, look, I was a great son to my parents. I was respectful of people, but through high school, I got bored very quickly, and there was certainly times when I wasn't sure, if I'd end up in prison or end up in a boardroom. And just because
Seriously?
of behavior. Yeah. Look, I think part of what I want to be able to do is demystify. I mean, I think it's not fair to a young generation that only gets to see the parts of us that we allow them to see. And so when they have their own struggles, their own challenges, their own failures, it's very easy for them to start believing that they're not enough. And I feel almost a responsibility to share my failures and my own vulnerability. I have, I did all the dumb things high school kids can do. I barely made it into a university. The fact that UNLV accepted me, so it brought me here. I had a 4-year school that said yes. And I probably had a super impressive 2.0 GPA and barely squeaked out of graduation in high school. But there was
Did you have to take SATs or ACTs back then, or no?
We did, but it was so much different. At least for me, my family and my parents didn't really drive the study and all the work that you needed to really prepare. It was like, oh, well, you're taking your SAT this weekend. Yeah, let us know how it goes. And that's about as much guidance as I had. And so I had no idea how well I did or poorly I did, but I did take it.
And you mentioned your wife, Candace, your
Yes.
3 daughters.
Right.
Tell us about them.
So Candace, even though I like to joke that she was in hot pursuit of me, the reality is far, far different, of course. But we met at UNLV. She was the president of her sorority. I was the president of my fraternity, Sigma Chi.
All right.
And I immediately was taken back by her. She from North Carolina, so had that wonderful Southern charm, cool little accent, and just I was smitten. But I, of course, put my shoulder back and played the macho dude, and we just kind of hit it off. And 30 years later, so in April we celebrated our 30th anniversary, and I will say. She has been the strength of character that I need when my strength of character isn't available. And somehow we've really just managed to grow stronger over the years. And look, I wish we weren't starting my family. It's an emotional part of who I became. And I owe so many people so much for tolerating when I had my own failures, my own fears.
How about your daughters?
Yeah, so you're just going to keep punching me in the gut?
Yeah, we'll move on after this.
Yeah,
and ask about your brother next.
Yeah.
So that should be fun.
It's the single greatest, triple gift of my life. And I think what really served them well and served me well is I was completely present in their lives as they were growing up. I was given a gift to kind of exit the business in 2007 and spent the next decade plus really being a part of their lives. They were all very, very serious equestrians, and we traveled all over. And the 3 girls were inseparable as best friends. Most people find this hard to believe, but I will say it succinctly. I have never heard either one of my daughters raise their voice to anybody, including one another. And I think that to me is kind of a test of who they are. They're confident, they're smart, they are proud, they are determined, they have values and a view of the world that I learn from to this day. So I think the biggest compliment I can give to who they became is our roles are reversed. And now I'm the student, and I learn from them and their views of tolerance and inclusion and acceptance of others, and so many things that weren't my strengths, that they remind me every day of what we could all be doing to be better people. And it's a joy. I have Savannah, my oldest daughter, still lives in San Diego, so I don't have to hunt her down. My middle daughter is recently engaged and lives in London.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, thank you. I always find it odd that we congratulate the parents. Like, I had nothing to do with it other than saying, go, good for you. But she's engaged to a super, super bright, Oxford educated barrister, and I have to talk about corn dogs and soft serve with him, because if he moves into his career path, I get lost very quickly. So she'll be married out there. And then my youngest daughter just graduated from school in LA as well, and now she's pursuing an acting career up in LA and wants to be in that industry. She's had her first short films accepted into a bunch of big music or film festivals, and just returned from Cannes in France to attend the film festival out in South France. And she's 21. And I really don't understand. I'm lost at how ambitious and organized not only my daughters, but their friends and others that I get to see. When I was 21, I don't know how it was for you, but the most important thing to me was
a little different.
Yeah, how do I have $5 to get to the all you can drink at the sports pub?
Yeah,
it was these kids today are.
We had Tom and Jerry's across from UNLV.
Oh yeah, okay, I remember Tom and Jerry's. I had
it was like dollar pitcher night. That was the big thing.
Yeah, well, we had Rum Runner for dollar shots.
Exactly. So same. I only bring up your brother because he's in the industry.
Yeah,
he's a broker He's a here. Man. Is he your only sibling?
I have two sisters that live up in Reno, and my brother, of course, here.
Cool. So your brother's a land broker here, and
he is.
He's going to show up later in our story.
Okay, I'll save some commentary.
You'll fact check again.
Okay.
All right. So this show is called Takeaways, and it's about people who I've learned from and who have influenced me. So I ask everybody, what has been the single most influential thing or event in your life that has defined or shaped you the most? Single.
One event. I mean, that really kind of narrows things down pretty quickly. I don't think I could really bring it that succinctly to a moment in time. But if you'll give me permission to perhaps give two.
Sure.
So reflecting back on my dereliction as a young teenage boy running around in California. I'm sure I had screwed up doing something, and I was waiting for the big moment when my father, kind of came down on me, verbally. Nothing more than that. But he would, when I failed as a son or as a kid, you knew that uncomfortable conversation eventually was coming. And I was on a long road trip with my dad, and I think we were heading up to our place in Tahoe, and I kept expecting. It was just awkward silence for hours in the car together. And my father was always a man of few words, but when the words came, they were well thought out and purposeful. But he had nothing to say. And eventually I kind of said, "Look, Dad, can we just kind of end this? I know if I've broke your trust once again, I want to just say what you have to say." And as sincerely and as genuinely as he could, he said, "I have nothing left to say." And I thought this was going to go in a horrible place. But he said, "Look, you're, at that time I was probably 16, 17, who knows, 18, 30. I mean, but, he said, your mom and I have done our work. Mm-hmm. You know what is right and what is wrong. You know the result from making poor decisions. It's not up to me to tell you that anymore. It's up to you to decide who you're going to be. What are you going to be remembered by? And how do you want the world to see you? And if you continue making these type of decisions, you know what the outcome will be, and you deserve to be harshly judged. If you make decisions that you know are correct and true and sometimes hard, you'll be on a different path. But that's no longer our role." And it was a weight actually dropped on me to kind of let me know I'm no longer under the care of my father. It's up to me. And so it kind of shook me a bit and helped kind of reframe. I think from so that was the first time I truly started to accept and take responsibility for who I was and my own actions. As a father, I would find, and I certainly don't want to isolate any one of my daughters, but my middle daughter had heart surgery at 20 months old.
Wow.
And when you as a parent are given that type of information, and you're called into a room and you're speaking to a grief counselor, that's going to help prepare you for remote but possible outcomes, and you're talking about your little angel. it snapped my universe. If you ever want to get focused on what matters, having a child in a life-threatening situation does it. And it actually, in retrospect, and from that moment on, after we got her home and she became healthy and a thriving young 21-month-old, it then served as my reminder every day. She had a large scar growing up, and so anytime we'd be at a beach or a pool or anywhere else, it would be a reminder to me that life is temporary and fleeting and delicate, and to not put the energy into the things that I truly am going to care about. It served as the most profound lesson and reminder of what my role is. And my role is to be a father and to be a husband and to be there for my children, and with a great reminder that tomorrow is promised to no one. Right? And that's, I think we could all benefit from learning that life is not this 50-year, 70-year, 80-year, 90-year journey. We are guaranteed. And seeing my daughter in that situation reminded me to cherish every single moment I have with my girls throughout their time with me.
What a contrast between the two about it's your responsibility to live the kind of life you want to live, and then the reminder that nothing's guaranteed.
That's right. And it serves me to this day. And I see the cube that we gave out. So that actually came from a kind of script I wrote, and we had these 23 elements of joy. We narrowed it down to fit on the rock, on this little rock that's on your desk. Mm-hmm. But those were kind of the life moments that I started to. And my view is not unique, by the way, Hayim. I just had the experience to amplify the emotion that's attached to it, and then sear it into my psyche of what it means. But if you start spending any time looking at end-of-life scenarios for people and what they think about, what they talk about, what they reflect about, to me, that is where we should all take pause and give great relevance to those statements, because you have people who are giving you the playbook. They're at their end of life. Now, the journey that we're all on, they have a view to say, here's what I wish I spent more time thinking about. And they're telling us it's here. And yet, we ignore that and get back into the daily grind, and somehow, the toxicity of our politics, our anger with someone driving a car that, gosh, they cut us off. And I'm really, have taken the time to control and learn on how I respond to, those moments, and make sure that I'm being true and keeping small things small.
One of the statements on here is live your life now.
Yeah.
So you wrote all of these?
Yes. Now, let's be clear. I mean, by right, I found inspiration.
Yeah.
Some things I reframed, but I don't deserve any of the credit for that, as much as organizing all these other stories I read and people that gave commentary, and it's endless. I mean, if you just look through kind of end in life, guidance on what people.
What? So did you actually do work talking to people at end of life and hearing what they say? Yep. Why?
Yeah, right.
Talk about that. What brought you to that?
I'm curious. Look, there's nothing unique about that. I mean, if you ask anybody, where can we get some great life lessons, and how would we kind of separate the essential few from the trivial many in this journey we're all on? The obvious people to speak to are the people who've been on the journey. They're the educators. So when you start reaching your 50s and your kids leave and all these other things evolve, you start to have your own quest. And I'm on that quest still, and I hope I'm on that quest for the rest of my life. And I want to extract all I can out of this part of my life, of the people I surround myself with, the type of work I do, the moments I create, the presence of being with people I love. I don't want to have regrets. And I think that's really what drives a lot of how I think and how I view the world, is to, I think one of the great wastes of a life would be to sit there at 85, 90 years old and look back and say, damn, there's a lot of things I said I would do. There's a lot of things I should have done. There's a lot of things I knew to do, and I chose not to. and I just don't want to be in that spot. I want to be able to look back with a sense of contentment and fulfillment. I think we all do. And I have a life well lived. I was true to my values. I was, made mistakes, but I owned them. I never hid when things got tough. I like to believe I showed up. I would like to believe I was the husband my wife dreamed of, the father my girls had hoped for. I mean, who wouldn't want to be able to say that?
I think a lot of people would want to be able to say that. And how many people actually do that? And why is there such a gap between the two?
Well, I don't have reference into how others, I don't have
and what are you doing
data.
here? Do you have,
Well, I don't know if you need statistical averages,
Yeah.
I haven't. But I've also learned, Hayim, for everyone's on their own journey, and it's not my.
Yeah.
I have no agency over how others want to live their life. I can only speak to the things that I find to be important, the things that keep me motivated, and the things that inspire me. Sometimes it's as simple as slowing down to look at an interesting piece of architecture. Other times it's having my hair blown back in some extreme, scary situation that scares me to the core, to remind me, like, wow, life is a range of emotions, and I want to take it all in. I have nothing left to hide. I have no agenda on where I need to go next. My success is in my girls. They've all made it out of school. They're all on their own life journey now, so they could afford to not have me in their life. Right. So my job as a father has more or less concluded. And so what's my next job? I get to kind of think about the relationship with my wife and the relationship with self.
I'm sure they would disagree with that statement slightly, but I get what you're saying. I want to go into the arc of your career, and I mentioned in your intro the 5 major ventures that you had before. Though you mentioned when you were talking earlier about mentors that you had. Are there 1 or 2 that come to mind that you can mention? I can ask you about.
So I think there's more been just snippets that I've extracted from a lot of people. Erwin Molaski was someone that and I know I assume Erwin somehow crossed paths with you.
A name everyone knows.
Yeah.
I've actually never met him.
Okay, yeah,
but he's godfather of Las Vegas real estate, essentially.
And look, Erwin, probably was like Jim Stuart who. So I'm also cognizant of that, but. There was a moment in time, and just because this is you have a lot of real estate listeners, I was pitching Mike Mixer and I to take over the Molaski families of businesses, and they wanted to consolidate some of their leasing and other interests into this and that. So for us as a young firm, it was a very big opportunity for us to go pitch Erwin personally, and it was mostly driven by Alan and the sons, but Erwin was going to be the audience because he was thinking about these things. And we had spent, weeks just preparing, and I'm going to step in a room with the legend of Las Vegas and try and convince him that he should, make a bet on this young startup called Stuart Mixer and entrust us with his life's work. No small, ask, right? And I came in with my whole team. We were buttoned up, we were polished, we were practiced, we were rehearsed, we were ready. I had volumes of books and things, and I knew his properties across his entire portfolio very, very well. And so I sit all this stuff down, and we're ready to go. And this room's full of people. We're in his rather eclectic office, and I start my spiel. I think it's all played out in my head, and within about 2 or 3 minutes, I could see his attention was wandering off like out the window, and my heart rate's accelerating. I think this is just not going to go well. And Erwin just slapped his hand on his desk and said, "Can someone tell me how long we have here together?" And one of the it might have been Alan or somebody had been, this is going to go for an hour. He goes, "You're presenting for an hour, is that right, Jim?" I said, well, "Yes." He goes, "I'll tell you what. Go to the last 5 minutes. Tell me what that is, and if I'm still interested, we'll keep talking." And it really just set me back, and I actually we had a great answer for that, and I was able to think on my feet, and I came up and said, "Well, my recommendation is we rebrand your entire company." And that stopped him in his tracks. Like, I thought we were talking about real estate, and so we went in this whole other conversation. But it was a one of those great business lessons to get to the point. We all, I think, out of maybe our own insecurity, or we want to pontificate to show how smart we think we are when in fact we are not. We have this innate desire to speak and talk and like me and use your hands and want to try and engage people and spew a lot of nonsense. And everyone said, don't tell me that. Tell me what's important, what's relevant, and then we'll talk. And so get to the point, big lesson. Another great mentor business-wise was Terry Wright. So Terry has since kind of sold his company, but back in the day, Nevada Title, and we were a young, growing company, and he hosted this great luncheon for us, and at his office, all of my work was going exclusively to another title agency and for our whole firm. And he brought in Spago and does this unbelievable, spread inside their office. They have all their leadership and China and Spago. I mean, this is otherworldly for a young guy like me in the business. And at the end, he never made an ask. And he kind of concluded like, look, guys, I'm not here to ask for your business. I want you to know that. I just wanted you to know our team and get to know one another, start developing a relationship. And when the time is right, we hope we're considered. But other than that, we really appreciate you being with us tonight. And that was another amazing kind of lesson around business that you don't need to force it. You really, if you just are authentic and true and you're patient and wait, then the right answer will present itself and the right partnerships will present themselves. But up until that point, I was, the eager, if I just talk loud enough and sell and promote and excite, then business happens. And Terry taught me that that's not the case. And then lastly, I'm going to add one more, who's Jim Murrin. I had the pleasure of meeting Jim through some mutual acquaintances, and at that time, I found it incredibly humbling that the CEO of the largest business in our state, and I think at the time he had 60,000 employees or some a remarkable number of people he was responsible to, somehow would carve out time and spend it with me. And I was able to watch Jim and his wife Heather kind of take over the helm of MGM under and then ultimately Mirage and Steve's properties, and do so with a level of elegance and humility that was a reminder that just because you hold the seat doesn't give you privilege to bring arrogance and entitlement into that conversation. And then I think as well to watch what they did, from a civic side and the contributions they made with Nevada Cancer and the research they do, Rock to Cure, and they were genuinely contributors and focused on making a difference in this town in ways that I don't think he gets enough credit for. City Center became a legacy, but City Center, and good and bad, right? So City Center had certainly walked into the teeth of an economic storm, but that was on while it was on his watch. It was not his fault. It was either things that are all beyond our control. But Jim always maintained a level of grace under those kind of pressures that I found to be remarkable.
Couple things. Was Mike Forche there that day? Do you know Mike?
Probably, yeah. We knew each other more in passing. I may have played a round of golf, which would have made it forgettable for him because he and Terry were pretty serious about this stuff. But yeah, I of course remember Mike.
He's who I recorded with last time. It's not out yet, but that was a fascinating conversation. Yeah. When you talked about Jim, you said the word grace. It feels like to me that grace is a big word for you. You use it a lot. Is that
I do?
Yeah.
Oh.
Accurate or no?
Well, I think it's a tremendously admirable quality for anyone to express, especially as we move up kind of through industry and perhaps it's you get perceived as having some role or some position that deserves undue admiration or accolades. And some people take it, and the people I've admired are actually more kind and humble and approachable and compassionate, empathetic. The kind of qualities that I hope to express for myself, and maybe that's why I attach to it. But I've found that the people that that sear in my memory and I can't forget and think about their words are people who acted and behaved in that way, men and women alike. Just a level of humility and self-awareness that seems out of place with their station in life or station in industry, and that I think takes work.
Yeah, Speaking about work, so you started a little company called Stuart Mixer that then became part of a national brokerage network called Colliers Parish that went on after to win the NAIOP Spotlight Award of Brokerage of the Year for like 12 years consecutively or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's kind of going back to I'm curious to ask you about the ventures that you've been in. Stuart Mixer, and was that your first that you stepped out on your own to start?
Beyond the lemonade stand?
Beyond the lemonade stand. That was your
I think that
practice round.
Yeah. It would be the first time that I was serious. We had done again, part of my job here is to demystify folklore. Mm-hmm. So I will. Mike and I, we fell into real estate by buying a house together as fraternity brothers. That's how this whole little journey, started. But between when we actually went into real estate and when we had a home together, we had this other little venture of going out and doing asphalt sealing for driveways. So don't ask how we found this, but we had a roommate who was from Buffalo, New York, and he talked about all the summers he would go out and go seal driveways for people, and it was cheap product, and you get paid a fair amount of money, and so we jump into this idea, and bought supplies and created a brand and whatever that meant at that time for us. Only to later realize that Las Vegans don't actually have asphalt driveways; they're all white concrete, and. So look, it's there a lot of the things
in today's world, when you have a startup and you need to,
you have to have a market.
You pivot. This is called a pivot. So do you guys pivot from the asphalt?
Yeah, we found there wasn't a future in it. So we couldn't convince people to pull out and put in asphalt driveways. But the venture into Stuart Mixer was kind of a combination of things. And first Mike and I were best of friends and fraternity brothers, and kind of looking at this economy in Las Vegas, back in was this the late 80s, early 90s, and thinking we can make money doing this. And I had interviewed with CB and some others at the time, but we really wanted to do land. That was kind of our thing, and nobody else was in that space, so it made it it was a tweener. Mm-hmm. Residential people didn't follow that, and commercial, I thought, well, it's foundational to how these buildings go up. So at some point, you have to acquire the right piece of real estate and understand why you bought that land, what is its infrastructure, what on and on and on. And there was no one practicing it. So it became our niche, so to speak. And we got pretty good at it, frankly, and did a lot of work for a lot of super important people in town because we were the only guys who seemed to understand it. And back then, you couldn't pull up an app and look at parcels. You went down the county recorder and you ran a microfiche machine and you printed these horrible photographs, and we would have a room no bigger than this, and the entirety of the walls were covered with sections of the Las Vegas Valley, parcel by parcel, and we'd write names and hard work, frankly. Mm-hmm. But it gave us a path to have our own differentiated value, and that allowed us to start seeing developers much earlier in the curve, and that allowed us to start soliciting other brokers to come in and say, well, we could sell the land, you could develop it with them, you can lease it, you could sell it. And I think really what happened at the time, it's a little shameful now looking back, but we were borrowing from our fraternity roots and said, why don't we can't be the smartest guys, we certainly don't have the most resources, so why don't we just be the most fun? And the first Stuart Mixer office, which was at Citibank Park, and now it was Ruth Chris down below. Mm-hmm. I can't remember what's there now, but we built a top patio and put a keg in the wall, and we hosted beer parties the first Friday of every month, and we just entertain. Let's just be approachable, fun, and create kind of this camaraderie among industry professionals and people like us, and just see if that was enough. And it served as a good lesson. Again, culture counts. And having good people that can have fun together counts. And to this day, I still do it. I still take people on trips and mile markers in some way. Just that reincarnated into how do I get a bunch of people from the industry and go do some adventure and have some fun together.
And then from there, was it Real Centric or Centra?
Yeah, so Real Centric. So Stuart Mixer became Colliers, and as you mentioned, merged with Colliers Parish, and in particular J.R. Parish, who was we don't have time, on this podcast, but one of the more amazing humans and soul. There's something very pure about how JR saw the world that I learned a lot from. So we did that. But once I found that I was now working for others, I really can learn that I'm not an employee. I don't mean that to be anything redeeming or otherwise, but I sat in a boardroom and I had a CFO of now the merged company telling me that if I have a credit limit and I need to get pre-approval on expenses and this and that, and I'm not a very tolerant person when it comes to others trying to manage how I spend my decisions and time. So that was short business. But also this is kind of late 90s, so the internet was really this big disruptive thing going on, and I just could not resist the siren call of pursuing technology and trying to understand what it would do to impact industries. And so I jumped in and created a company called RealCentric.
And what did it do?
So in interesting ways, at that time I was hanging around with the guys from LoopNet and CoStar. Those were also little nascent startups, and we'd be on panels together. And in fact, his name escapes me now, who's still at the helm of CoStar, Andrew something to effect. But in our case, we were taking. I mean, in fairness, it was very disruptive to the business because we were taking the inventory of product, office space principally, and reorganizing in a way that businesses themselves can look at the availability, understand where they can lease. It had an auto generator for RFP. We would get enough mass in a market before we launch it so that it was immediately valuable. So if you kind of think about the pipeline I was trying to open, it was to get people that were seeking space, give them the information they need in order to find space, and then help facilitate a transaction. It's kind of
the transaction piece is in
leasing.
Parts also leasing, but didn't you also have construction management?
Well, so we organized a set of professionals that we would vet through as you kind of imagine that leasing process. And now a tenant is you're kind of giving up their valuable time and resources in an industry and a process they're not familiar with. So kind of demystifying that was a big part of our project. So we would have a professional services team. So we make sure that here's 3 transactional lawyers to hire, that you could interview. Here's 5 subcontractors that we have kind of vetted through, loosely to, extremely, that we would stand behind as being, professionals you can talk to. So just trying to help streamline and bring some education and process. But what we were really after was capturing businesses that were in the middle of transition. So if you think about the companies who ended up actually funding us and being part of it, I had Cisco and Steelcase and Microsoft and Nortel Networks and on. And the great answer for them in our technology was, I can give you a valuable customer at the exact moment they're making decisions around the product you sell. So if you just take that and look at a Steelcase, the amount of wasted effort they have to do to be top of mind on that one time every 7 years you're thinking about moving, that's an extraordinarily inefficient system. So we had kind of designed it that you can find space, you can build a space, and then outfit the space. And the objective being, go from I need space to my space is up and operating. It was a hell of a ride.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Ahead of its time.
Another humbling lesson that the world doesn't move as quickly as it does in my mind. They're a little more thoughtful than.
But you also ran up against the .com boom.
It was, but I think the .com. It's easy to point at the meltdown of 2000, but the other side of it really was that the world wasn't going to change as fast as all the hype was trying to force change. It was a combination of those things, not simply we were not a victim. We were relying on big assumptions that people were ready to adopt these technologies, would do so broadly and do so quickly, and the reality was very different. People are cautious and don't like change, and that's true today, right?
It sure is. One of my mentors, Jeff Finn, whose family started NAI Global, Jeff's father, pioneered the concept of corporate services real estate that now CB and JLL and all those folks are in now. He pioneered it back in the late 70s. When they sold NAI, he then got into the technology business and says similar things. One of his taglines is, if you want to herd cats, you give them tuna, talking about getting brokers to adopt technology. Yeah. Usually it's technology is developed in our industry by the managers because they want to manage a process, not for the brokers who, at the end of the day, want to put money in their pocket.
Yeah.
And so his answer to the adoption curve is design something tuna for the cats, basically, to get them to move.
I'll take tuna for the cats as my analogy now.
Yeah, and then came Centra Point. For you.
Centra
Properties. Excuse me.
Yeah. There was a dark moment in between, but yes, then I jumped into Centra.
What's the dark moment?
So we're going all the way. We're getting in the gutter. So, look, when Real Centric went down, and most people to this day and age won't recall it, but those of my friends that were still active in the business back then, it was the first time I really had to question my own value, my own intellect. It's when imposter syndrome rears its head and says, you're not what you think, and you might not be even close to what you think. So that company collapsed. We wound it down, and we had 125 employees and offices around the country, wow. And we were doing. It was equally thrilling and exciting, and then quickly ending. And it was a time in my life where I started to see the depths of despair and what isolation can feel like, what failure feels like. I spent many. I would still drive into my office even though there was no one there because I didn't know what else to do, and I would just sit there and kind of stare at a computer and ask. Now I had children, I had a wife, I had responsibilities, and I had nothing, and it's tough, and I had to get back on my feet. So I think you mentioned earlier, kind of Ironman as a kind of, and I know you've run marathons now, so that's actually why I got into endurance sports. It was my way out to validate to myself that I have. Yes, I could take on these failings, but it doesn't compromise my determination. And so I said, well, what would be really hard that is only up to me? And Ironman. Right? And there's no place to hide in Ironman. There's no one who's going to swim for you. There's no one who's going to ride your bike. Every pedal stroke is your energy. That end of that bike ride, and then getting on a lacing up shoes to run a marathon after 8 hours in the sun on a hot bike ride or race. It's really freaking hard, and the training is hard. The work is hard. Getting over that's hard. But it's all up to you. It's a very individualistic journey, as you know. And I needed to prove to myself that I still can show up, and that was my answer for myself. And what I did at the time said, I'm going to allow the pity party to run until the day I start that race, and then it's over. And I'm going to go race. I'm going to leave it all out there, and then when I'm over, I'm going to go back home and look for what's next. And that became Centra.
So much in that comment too.
Well,
there's I started running. I've not done an Ironman, but I relate to what you're saying. A theme that kept coming up for me in running is runs don't run themselves.
Yeah,
and it's you and the road, and that's it. And it's one foot in front of you. You want to finish the run, it's one foot in front of the other until you finish the run.
Right.
And the marathon's one thing, but the training for the marathon is really the thing.
That's right.
And so David Goggins, are you familiar with him?
Of course.
So he's got his second book, and his mom's in his. He and her narrate it, and she made a comment about a mother watching her son do to himself what he's doing, and she said, "I knew that he had to destroy himself for him to be reborn." That's what came to mind when you were talking about that.
All right.
So Centra Properties. So now you're a developer.
Lo and behold,
is that's what Centra did, right?
That's right. Yeah, we were developing. Yes. So that was a really magical time in this economy and in Las Vegas specifically, kind of early 2000s, and it seemed like you can do no wrong out here. Money was coming in from all directions. I started thinking, at the time, if I just put up a few buildings so I could have passive income, and I wasn't going to make a big deal of it. I don't even think it was called Centra in the beginning. It might have been something different, but of course, on I go, and I can't quite throttle back. And I was given an amazing gift, and that gift came from one of the people I admire probably more than most in my life in our industry, and that's Doug Roberts. And Doug was kind enough to mentor and help point me in the direction. I was ambitious to develop, and I thought I knew what I was doing, but of course I did not. And Doug would put his arm around me and say, "Let me point the way, son." And He had a large project out in North Las Vegas at Craig Road that his company was not going to pursue, even though he believed strongly in it. It just didn't have the support he needed. And he handed it to me and just basically said, replace my deposit. I'll help you along the way. And we'll co-develop, just split the development fee. And he sat side by side with me and steered me into the journey and gave me credibility. And I was able to say, I'm partnered with Panattoni when really, Doug was just there to help. And right, and it's interesting because I don't know if I've ever really shared with him how impactful that was to what I did, but it was Doug, and to this day, still I consider him to be one of the best human beings in this business, and one of the more genuine, and certainly among the smartest guys I know in this business.
Yep.
And so
my first, I didn't know that about you and Doug.
Yeah, my first project was 800,000 square feet, and yeah, and it was crazy. And so there's one more kind of business lesson sat in there. So at the time, we were putting up this big spec building. Somehow we figured out how to get it financed, and we were RC Willey was in the market at the time. They were new to the market, and they were looking for a few 100,000 feet, which was a very big deal back then. And I was up against Prologis, who was just down the street.
The largest industrial developer on planet Earth.
And
against you?
Yeah. So, and Marv Jensen, it's like I still remember all these names like they were yesterday, was the real estate director. He's coming in from Salt Lake to come and make some final decisions on this tour. And we did not have a permit yet, but that didn't stop us. So I called some of the guys involved in the job, said, can we get some equipment out there? Can we get a water tank and drop a trailer and did
so like a realtor would stage a house today. You're staging a development site.
I staged a development site, and but we really thought about it, our numbers and all the things. And when Marv came in, I said, I just turned over my pro forma, and so I'm just going to walk you through exactly the rate I'm going to quote you. I'm going to tell you how I got to that number, and my hope is when you see how we underwrote your lease, you will recognize that we are absolutely trying to be as fair and as aggressive as we can be. But on the other side, there's only so much I can do. But I have no secrets. I'm just going to share everything with you. And so, I don't think Marv was prepared for that type of presentation, but that's what I did. I felt I had no other hope. And I think the rate I quoted was 31.5 cents. And so then he finishes the tour and he goes to Prologis, and I think they quoted him 34 cents or something at the time. And he picks us. And I still remember that it might have been Dan Doherty who shared with me the comment from Marv, but later Prologis called and said, okay, we'll do 31 cents.
I figure like that's the starting point. You just went right to it.
Yeah, and
you just got to the point like Erwin taught you.
Yeah, I got to the point. And then Marv, you just have to give credit to people who make these foundational decisions. And he told Prologis, like, if you had that from the beginning, you should have told me, not now. And he stuck with me. And we finished up that building. My daughters to this day, think it's that I made them do an RC Willey dance around our living room, and this is a big moment for me. I had a big tenant, I had a project, and our approach of just being clear and candid worked in that situation, and off I went.
And then came Perch. Actually, hold on. Before we do that, I want to share a story I have from your Centra days.
Okay.
Kind of.
Is it a good one?
It's 2005-ish.
Okay.
Does that sound about right?
I was still doing things then, yeah.
So I got my real estate license in 2004, and like most people back then in Las Vegas, it wasn't to be a professional in real estate. It was if we ever bought or sold anything as a family, I would get a little commission. That was the reason I got my license. And then it became clear that if I wanted to do real estate, it's not a passive thing. It's not a part-time thing. I'd have to jump in with both feet to make it a career.
Right.
But somewhere along that lines, I remember looking at a magazine, one of the glossy ones out there, a Vegas Inc. or one of these type things, and flipping through, and I see this ad for the next condo development of Las Vegas.
Yeah,
4,000 some odd units, beautiful. If I remember right, it was like black motif to the image, and down at the bottom left was George Clooney.
Yeah,
I was like, George Clooney's a developer now?
Right.
That's what I thought. And that was called Las Ramblas.
Las Ramblas, yes. Yeah.
And I understand you were involved with a lot. That was a Centra development, wasn't it?
That was our project, yes.
Yeah, that was your project.
Yeah. So Yeah. I had, I had George Clooney and the Related Group, specifically out of New York and,
Those are
and
the
Florida.
Gerbers?
Well, no, Related is the developer,
yeah.
and then Randy Gerber and Scott Gerber, and oddly enough, I'm from here. I'm going to go meet with Scott, and we're still doing things together, and he's involved with me out at Uncommons, and that was a part of a journey that was beyond surreal. I mean, I can remember sitting in Related's office. Brad Pitt had just made an architectural presentation, and he was filming Jesse James at the time, so he came in with a black beard and was nervous and fumbling, and just he was an aspiring architect or passionate. It was really awkward. But I had George Clooney in there and Randy and all these super important guys out of Related Group, and at that time it was called Time Warner Center, and right on Columbus Circle, boardroom of 2,000, 3,000 square feet with floor to ceiling glass looking out across Central Park, and I always sat somewhere between what the hell am I doing here? And sometimes I would just take the moment and said, look at me sitting here. And I really kind of, but I don't ever think I actually, should be in a room with Related and George Clooney and contemplating a $4 billion project. But there I was. And it allowed me to imagine that anything's possible. And what was even more surreal is when Clooney was out on David Letterman and Jay Leno and holding up renderings of our project. And he was generally involved. I mean, he really had some ideas of how he wanted to see this project come together. And then from there, he and Randy did Casamigos. So they kept on going. And Casamigo, they sell for $1 billion. And in the case of Las Ramblas, I sold it to Credit Suisse, which is kind of the greater fool theory. They still believed the market was what it was. Another business lesson I will tell you. So I had our team at that time, there's probably 100 condo towers. It was always this Manhattanization, so to speak, of I'm not sure who coined that term. But all these condos were going on, all these pre-sales, all this hype and excitement. And so I had one of our guys go out and just spend some time in the kind of after-hour parties with all the people who were the sales agents and all the ladies and men that were responsible for these condo sales. And we wanted to get the truth. So there's one thing, there's the hype and the public reporting, but what's the real intelligence? And that was kind of a moment, and someone described it, the difference between intelligence and information. Information is knowing, who Claudia Schiffer is. Intelligence was having her phone number, right? So you had to get, a layer lower to really, be able to, truly have, a view of what was going on. And lo and behold, by the time we spent some time really in a social setting with the people signing these contracts, we started to learn that the price per square foot was not what was being reported in the papers, that the sales velocity was largely driven by a lot of out-of-towners that would come in and put deposits on 6 units with the hope that they would flip it as the property became. And that was common practice in places like Miami and elsewhere. But that's not a real business. And so we came back to Related and brought them all in a room, including Clooney and Gerbers and all of our partners, and basically did a big presentation at the Four Seasons to those partners and said, the emperor has no clothes. I mean, the very idea, the very fundamentals that we underwrote this $4 billion project don't stand the test, and we have to get out. And we did, and we ended up selling for the biggest profit I've ever had in any one project or transaction. It was the biggest windfall I've been, and it was the lesson was most people perceived it as a failure. They didn't build it. And the reality was the smartest thing we could do was to get out of the way and let someone else who still believed in the fictitious information that was out there, and they bought it. And it happened to be Credit Suisse, who had put among some of the smartest people in the world. But fundamentals, you have to get up close and personal to really understand what's going on.
Lick the brick.
Lick the brick. There you are. That's a Jimism. That is, and indeed it is. Lick the brick.
So that comes from, I had a listing. You were interested in it, became interested in it after I groveled and begged, and then someone else told you it was a good idea. So then you started looking at it again. Yeah. And you and I are on the phone one day, and you said, no, we got to get out and lick the brick. And I was like, it was so graphic.
Yeah. You thought this guy's an idiot.
So, ha ha ha. I mean, later on, we're all in the building, and we're talking about what your plans were in the market and this and that. And you, in fact, licked the brick, and it's on video somewhere.
Yeah, but that was at your request, I think, or maybe even your demand.
I don't think I requested it.
Somebody brought that up.
Someone mentioned it. You were game for it. You did it. Yeah, you walked the talk, is what I'm saying. It is a
metaphor.
That's all
I just want to make sure we're clear. But I think, though, Hayim, there's real value there, though. I mean, First of all, just the expression "lick the brick." It's sticky, so you haven't forgotten it, and you have to. I think one of the things that kind of gets lost is now you have all these great services that will give you all the information you need to look at vacancies and rates and on and on and on, until you get up close and personal with a building and really understand its nuance. Especially now, you're just not doing your job, or you're not a true student. You're taking the easy transaction, you're shuffling information around, and you're trading on information. And I
say physically walking the property is a data point. You have to collect that data point.
And I would say you have to. This is going to feel a little squishy, but you have to feel the environment. Walking a neighborhood versus looking at it on Google Earth are two very different experiences. And it's the little things that start to present themselves and show up that inform the big thing. We're now trading a lot of big thing information, and people are like, well, here's the rate, here's a tour, here's a deck. It's knowing that the glass line on level 3 is different than level 4, and here's why. And how do I know that? Because I walked the building. And that's when you start to be able to provide counseling and guidance and insight that becomes very valuable. For me, looking at a piece of property, I have to sit with it for a while. There's never been a piece of real estate that I haven't parked my car, usually with a cup of coffee or cold drink, and just do nothing. Try and take an hour, 2 hours, and just sit there quietly and see what shows up. And many, many times I've learned that when we start to trust kind of that non-conscious instinct after years of experience, it's telling you something. And we get so caught up that we need to have this cognitive awareness. We need to intellectualize and summarize. And for me, I still feel that the best things I have done have just come from slowing down and listening to my inner voice, talking to others, walking a neighborhood, asking what they talk about, what they feel, what they think, what's their needs. And then slowly you get somewhere. But in this fast-paced world we tend to work with, it's like, I got a piece of real estate, let's start drawing it, let's do this. And at least for my process, that doesn't work.
So I'm on a run this morning because marathon training started 3 days ago.
All right.
And I'm listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast. And he's got a neuroscientist on there.
Yeah.
And they're talking about this very thing.
Yeah.
That there are things you can feel that we wouldn't really ascribe to. And some of the stuff they're working on is taking data from the stock market and porting it into a band, and you can feel on your skin the movements of the stock market, as an example. So what you talked about as far as sitting there and feeling, and it's squishy, it might be science here pretty soon. I mean, it is, but maybe not to the mainstream. Okay,
I'm not sure about the stock market feeling on my arm, but I'm gonna trust that smarter people have said this works.
So I want to talk about perch and matter, and then we'll go into the next section.
All right.
Tell us about perch. How'd you get into perch? What is perch?
Yeah. So perch was another one of these emotional journeys that takes you to the highs and the lows. So you can imagine me as a enthusiastic father. Escaped the tragedy that became the great financial crisis. I'm safe. I have my girls, my wife. I'm off to California, returning to where I started, and I'm going to build what I described to my family as a memory-making factory. We had bought this great piece of real estate in this home, and we were going to reset the whole thing. And everything I was intending to do was around creating a place for my children and my family to have all these memorable moments, from dining to sharing a movie together or what have you. I mean, I was dedicating my life to these moments. And that's a wonderful journey, through acquiring a piece of real estate, meeting with your builder, meeting with architects, meeting with interior designers, and it holds up very, very well, and it's led by people who are experts at what they do and can provide real guidance. And eventually, they sent me to an appliance store, high-end appliance store that it was called Standards of Excellence. It was I'm not sure they're around anymore, but big regional, 15, 20 stores. I don't know how many they had. And I was as enthusiastic and as excited as any man could be to go do this. And now I'm going to go pick out the stuff. I do enjoy cooking, and I was going to find what is the latest and greatest and the coolest stuff I could buy. I wasn't thinking budget. I wasn't thinking anything. I was just like, I'm going to turnkey this house into something extraordinary. And you're met with indifference. And so I went, bouncing into this, great showroom, and it was dark and dimly lit. And there was some young person behind the counter who asked me if I have an appointment. And I said, no, but I have plans and a lot of enthusiasm, and I can't wait to explore with you all. And I was, it didn't go well.
Get out.
And there's no one available, but feel free to walk around. And so then you're forced to kind of look at this stuff stacked on, in some cases in boxes in these, warehouses. Nothing works. You're, counseled by sales associates who don't know how to cook, right? So they're selling you equipment. I mean, I started thinking, well, what other category can you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in, and you don't ever get a chance to test it, and it's sold to you by people who don't know how to use it? So if you just put that into the category of automobiles and thought, okay, so if I went to a car lot today and all the cars were there, and they're some covered in dust, some not, some had looking disrepair, some were clean, but you couldn't drive them, can't turn them on. The person selling it to you doesn't actually have a driver's license, and you're relying on them to guide you in making a very expensive long-term decision. That was the luxury appliance business. And I just couldn't get it out of my head that this is a broken industry. So got organized with some people and decided that this industry should look a lot differently. It should be emotional. It should be something that allows us to dream about how we see ourselves living, then interact with the very machines that we're contemplating, and then only then would you have the context to make an informed decision about what's right for you. Right? You don't know the brands, you don't know what they do, you don't know what the latest and greatest technology is. So you need to get in there and roll up your sleeves and be guided by people. So I hired a firm out of the UK by the name of Fitch. They were doing some of the greatest expression of retail experiences anywhere in the world. They had just finished McLaren and Tiffany. And
how'd you find them?
Just started looking at who won all the big awards. And so it was interesting. Everyone could relate. So I ended up with this gentleman, Christian Davies, who I brought into Southwest Gas. And you understand who Christian is. I was, found that he was doing this great work that I admired. He won a lot of great awards. Found a phone number, and on a Saturday morning, took the shot and called his office. And lo and behold, he was the only one there, and he answered. And so I said, hey, Christian, my name is Jim Stuart. You don't know me from anybody. And what I may say may be either offensive or interesting. I don't know what the outcome will be. But let me tell you something. Have you ever bought, appliances for your house? And he's British, says that, already the intellectual accent. He goes, of course, mate, it's I said, well, it's a horrible experience. He goes, oh my God, it's disastrous. And well, that also applies at the luxury category. And I said, do you know any retail category where you can go in and spend $100,000, $200,000, $300,000?
This is literally the first conversation?
First conversation with Christian. And we spent the next hour on the phone. I pulled it into a parking lot and just sat there and we just talked. And what became obvious to him and I is everybody has a story about this. Being on this, it's like the worst thing you could do when you're building the most important monument to your family and to your life. Yet no one has good experiences with it. And I just felt that was antithetical to how consumer purchasing should take place. So we built
and the most intimate thing, which is your home, and it's, you said long term. I kind of chuckled. Like a car, we think about it as long term, 5 years at the most.
Maybe
you put a bathtub or a shower, like how long is that in there for?
Could be generations.
Yeah,
right. So and then when you really start to look at it that way, now remember, I'm coming off this phase of I'm going to build this memory making factory, and there's no place for me to execute that. And I can't test that other people believed and felt the same as I did, but this is where I felt. And when you then break the category down, it's so senseless, because here you are, the most expensive pieces you're going to put into your home that adorn the most important rooms in your home and provide the backdrop to the very memories that you're trying to create in your home. Your kitchen, a spa retreat for your bath, your children's room, your shower, all these, your outdoor cooking and dining space. These are all intimate spaces that in many ways inform and create and instigate the memories and experiences you're going to have with the people you care about, right? And the essence of home. And yet the category wasn't presented that way. So I worked under this kind of construct of dream, play, choose, that you would, if you're doing this ideally, you would build a front end to a store that allowed your imagination to run wild, to see what's possible, then you would be interacting with chefs and wellness directors and others and turning things on and playing and cooking and learning. And only then you would be able to walk to the back third of the showroom where now you're in the choose phase where, okay, I understand I want a 48-inch dual fuel range, in this approximate budget. And here are the 3 category brands that have been vetted by Perch in order to, say, make an informed decision. And that's what we did. And I had the same people who took Restoration Hardware public, Catterton out of the East Coast, one of the biggest private equity, consumer-facing private equity firms in the world, got behind us and put the gas pedal to the floor and said, open across the country as many as you can, as quickly as you can, and let's go public. And we really ran super hard. And it was an amazing journey. I really won all kinds of awards, met all kinds of amazing people, that were doing the work behind Apple or the work behind Tesla and building these great mixed-use properties, and off we went.
So I don't know if I should share this or not, but I'm going to anyway because we talked about just going for it earlier. So you brought in Christian Davies, architect from Boston, to look at this property that you had under contract. I was a listing agent. It's in Spring Mountain. It's in Spring Mountain, which is Las Vegas, Chinatown. He is, as you described him, one of the foremost authorities in architecture as it relates to retail experiences.
Yep.
And so I'm driving him back from the property to the office, him and maybe 2 people on his team, I'm guessing, and he talks about how you guys connected. He's telling them. I'm driving, listening.
Yeah.
And he brought up Perch and this appliance thing, and I guess it's in the play phase because you guys were designing the store, and part of it is the shower.
Yes.
And what do people do in the shower? Sometimes they have sex. And you guys had a conversation like, well, what if they do that in the store? And it's like, well, then they do it in the store.
Christian has a bit of a distorted view of the world. I will say though we did. So it's interesting what does get, but again back to what's sticky. So when we're when I go through these thought processes and I'm trying to think, okay, how are we going to present this to the world? How do we make it memorable? And that is a consistent thread for the type of things I like to work on is what's going to be the one thing that people walk away with and can't forget. And so when it came to Perch, we built what we called the sanctuary. So we built a building within the building, and all the showers were live. There's live steam rooms and saunas and on and live bathtubs. And we would allow people to make an appointment and close it off. And if you want to go get naked and go test out this. I mean, think about it. Every morning,
the shower pressure, 100%. That's
you're starting with what comes out. Everyone runs around thinking, "Oh, I need a rain shower head." I don't find anybody that actually enjoys having a rain shower head. But we all thought you did, but you never got tested. Yeah. Had you tested it, you would have said that doesn't work for me. But Christian and I became, we were deeply connected on this idea that we're going to build a retail experience that encourages people to get naked. And it became a big thing. And so whenever the media would write about Perch, they would invariably get to this idea like, here's a store where you can get naked. And that became the thing, right? And so we had a lot of fun with it.
Then comes Matter.
Yeah. Yes.
So you're on a bike ride with 2 friends.
Yes.
You guys decide, hey, let's have another journey together or a journey together.
Yeah, makes it sound a little bit more more well thought out, but it wasn't clearly that. I think I was really the one that needed a place. Mm-hmm. I was looking for my next thing. My youngest daughter had left for college or was on her way to leave to college, and I concluded that I had come back to the vinyl record. I think I had a couple good songs left in me, and I will forever be grateful and indebted to Matt and Kevin, my partners. I mean, they are 2 men and fathers and husbands and individuals that reflect and live by a code and set of values and principles that don't show up very often. In fact, I have 2 partners that every day inspire me to be true and better as a human, as a person. What a gift. And the very idea that the 3 of us have complementary skills and I can live in my dreamland, which ironically is about the only thing I think I do well, and they can tolerate that, and they give me enough rope to go out and think absurd things, and then have someone of Matt's intellect to really synthesize those ideas into marketable, commercialized projects, and then have Kevin to back that up and say, well, can we actually build what you 2 dummies are thinking about here?
Maybe I have it backwards. You had the model for Perch was dream, play, choose.
Yeah.
I'm writing Jim as dream. I put Kevin as play and Matt as choose.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. I don't know. You're trying to connect all those dots, but so
I didn't until you started talking about it.
So I think about it more in the kind of the 3 C's. So I live in the world of, I'm the creative side.
Mm-hmm.
Matt is capital and Kevin is construction. Okay. It makes it a lot easier if you think about it in just a more elementary way.
Same thing.
Yeah, but here,
different words here.
They're different. We choose them carefully. But here I am again, at a point in my life that I never anticipated, learning every day. I sit in rooms with those two and others on the team, and they speak in a language. They articulate their directions. They organize thoughts that are abstract and put them into logic and reason. And I sit back in disbelief that I have the joy of even being a part of it. It's and then, I think you might people constantly well you don't I don't take compliments very well, and I don't want people to applaud anything we're doing about me, because it can't be about me, and it really makes me very uncomfortable because I have awareness, and the awareness is it's easy to have an idea. Lots of people have ideas. Executing those ideas is when it gets hard, and so to have people behind me that can take these abstract notions that I come up with and actually turn them into something real is it's breathtaking. I mean, to this day, I still walk around on any of my projects and wonder, how did we sketch that around on a napkin, only to find that there's thousands of people out here assembling a back end of a manifold on a particular fire riser, and they know what goes where and what connects to what and how it's supposed to function. And it's a humbling business when you think about ground up development and how it all works.
So I'm in the commercial real estate industry, and because of NAIOP, I've been around developers, and that's their core business. That's their day to day. Is being a developer. I'm so fascinated by the developer as a profession for a lot of reasons, but to take a piece of dirt and create something out of it, and the variations of options that are there, and the choices to make, and the risk. And I imagine the sleepless nights, and then
indeed
nights when you get the deal and your daughters are dancing in the living room.
Yes,
it's awesome.
You learn very quickly to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, which has become a bit cliche. But look, the world of development for some reason has this kind of romantic notion to it. Maybe just there's bigger than life personalities that get involved. But it's a trade-off, and I have a lot of younger people that come and say, "Well, I want to be a developer," and I said, "Well, do you really why?" And I think that we get misguided. We see the good,
Glamour.
we see exactly, and it's alluring, and I understand it's it's the siren call to, wow, I could be on a stage and I could point to projects and I could say I did this, and I get that. But what I think deserves to give equal measure in as people are contemplating this journey is, but what are you giving up? So we're very quick to recognize and embrace the reward, but with reward there's an offsetting piece, which is, and what is the loss? Mm-hmm. And I would say there is a loss, and the loss for me has been time. It has been stress. It has been constant self-doubt. And if anyone believes that I wake up every morning and full of enthusiasm and confidence, like, look at the genius of our group, they would be sorely mistaken. I probably wake up most days afraid, scared, and questioning, did we think this through? Is this right? Is this the moment where it all goes horribly wrong? And
is it constant?
For me, it is.
Yeah. One of the things you and I talked about once, and the way I'll set this up is when you're on a run, I process my thoughts deeply in a variety of ways, and that's part of the fun in running. It's a very cerebral activity, almost more than it is physical. And I'm on one of these runs, and this is how it went. It's like, so I'm going to talk to Jim, and I want to ask him, like, when does Jim Stuart become Jim Stuart? Kind of what you just talked about. People hold you up because you've done all these things. And, in your Centra days, you did a project in the Southwest called Centra Point before the Southwest was the Southwest. And in our industry of commercial real estate, the Southwest in Southern Nevada is Main and Main because it connects Summerlin and Green Valley and the proximity to the airport and the Strip. And you were there a cycle ago. And then you did Town Square, and everyone knows Town Square.
Right.
And that was all you. And it's like, and now Jim Stewart's coming back to town, and he's going to start developing again.
But don't do that. That's it's misguided.
Well, so like, I imagine you go from being just a normal person in California where your dad has to tell you right from wrong, and then all of a sudden now you're Jim Stewart.
Yeah, and then that
was like, when did Jim Stewart become Jim Stewart? And then I got into the self and self-awareness, and then I've been lucky enough to, or unlucky enough to have a lot of these assessments, personality assessments, ranging from the DISC profile to the Holland model to the Myers-Briggs. I've done probably 7 or 8 variations of these assessments. And one of the things that always stuck out for me, you think about I am who I am, but that's not exactly true. And on one of these assessments, there's like page 8 has 3 graphs, and one of them is your private self, which is your core, which is how you would respond to stress if nobody was watching, so to speak. Then there's the public self, which is the mask that you put on for others, or in a way, kind of like with your soft serve example, your daughter's made that a thing for you, so now it's a thing for you, even though really in your private self might not be a thing for you.
Right.
And how many times that shows up in your day-to-day life when you have your mask on for others. And then there's the perceived self, which is how you see yourself, and the self-talk and the imposter syndrome, and that's where that stuff starts showing up.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about asking you, when did Jim Stewart become Jim Stewart? And then I'm thinking about this whole category of self-awareness and the different layers of self-awareness. And then I'm preparing this question, and I do some research. So bear with me. This is a long and messy way to get into this.
I assume we're going somewhere, so
we'll go somewhere. We'll go somewhere. From your LinkedIn, so I imagine either you wrote this or somebody wrote it and you approved it. So I'm going into the private or perceived self, or maybe it's the public. For reasons that I may never fully understand, I've always seen the world differently. Unable to accept status quo. Unwilling to sit on the sidelines. I have had the joy and some misery taking on bold challenges from my earliest memories. From your Matter website, which, again, I can imagine when you're starting up a venture like that and you're really going inside yourself to say, what is this going to be about? And either you're writing this yourself, because I imagine you're a writer, or you're having your PR firm or your consultant or whoever.
I can, anything that's going to reflect my voice is my voice.
Okay.
Yes.
So Jim became an entrepreneur because working for somebody else just wasn't working. Cursed by seeing all the ways commercial development could be done better and burdened by proving he knew how, he had to follow his vision. So is that you talking about you, or did someone?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay. And then
probably with some help, if I'm to be clear.
By chance,
ICSE
was in Vegas a few weeks ago, which is big real estate convention, 40,000 people, however many come here. I'm at a dinner, and someone, you play the geography. So someone from Northern California is here, and they're, oh, you're from Vegas? Oh, do you know Jimmy Stewart? Like, you call him Jimmy?
Yeah,
I call him Jimmy. Yeah. And we get to talking about Jim Stewart, and I guess he was in grade school with you.
Yes. Yeah.
And I asked him, like, has he always been like he is? And then I'm trying to, what is he like? But I didn't have to answer. He answered. He's always been not defiant, but certainly not okay with the status quo. And that was your buddy Fernando.
Fernando Cuevas. Yeah. I remember the text you gave me. Yeah.
And so you started talking about, your developer and your Jim Stewart, and don't compliment me. And every day you wake up and there's some sense of something could go wrong. Right. But anybody out from the outside would look at you and say, this guy's got it all. He's got exciting work history. He's done some amazing things. That you started a company like Stuart Mixer that then went on to win 12 years consecutively brokerage company of the year. That you went and developed with Centra Properties, all these things that we enjoy today as a community, and the whole George Clooney and Brad Pitt story. Yeah. And now you're back because you still have some more music left in you, I guess. Right. But even your industrial buildings, which are not exciting, look beautiful.
No, thank you.
Clearly, you guys put some design thought to the exterior.
We do.
But yet someone like you still struggles with, what do you want to call it? Imposter syndrome, or questioning yourself, or?
I think imposter. look, I don't think it's if I'm to how I frame it with myself is I don't think I'm unique in any way in any of this that you're discussing. And look, my talent is that I'm able to look around the corner and see things that aren't as obvious to everybody else. I'm not even sure that's a talent. It's just an attribute of how my mind has been conditioned to work. I don't know where that comes from. Is that any less redeeming or any less important or any more important than other people who have other skills that I don't have? I think the only distinction between the skill that I have, potentially have, right? Not going to say I do have, that I'm learning every day, and my tolerance to take on pressure and uncertainty in ways that others are not comfortable doing, right? So that it just so happens that if you have those attributes, that can be monetized in a way that gives this perception of success, right? Capital reward and the trappings of an American society of I have all the cool stuff, I have all whatever we're supposed to acquire. We're conditioned to believe we need, but in no ways do I believe that deserves any more attention. In fact, I sit in wonder and awe for the people who do the real work in this world, the people that are helping others and do it selflessly and do it without the celebration and do it without the recognition. They do it because they're pure and they're generally out to make life easier for others. That's where I would much rather be someone that people can visit. The contributions he made were made in silence and were made anonymously and were made in a profound way that created impact and changed directionally how people that are less advantaged were able to live their life. I mean, if someone ever described that, that structure and put my name into it, I would take that 100 times over, any building or anything that people can point to. And the reason I get so uncomfortable with this whole, idol, type concept that there's certain somehow what I've done deserves any more credit or is out of reach for others. I think it's a disservice not only to me because it's not who I am, and I'm as dumb and as goofy and as hopefully fun at times, and also frightened and vulnerable and scared, and I'm in love. I want to be loved. I want to be respected by my children. If anything, age has taught me to stop worrying about the people beyond a very tight circle. I've become very comfortable with not worrying about other people, not requiring nor needing the opinions of others to validate what the life I'm trying to live for me. And I think Hayim, the reason I react to it in a way, and some people think I overreact to dismiss those type of accolades, because I think it's not fair. Not to me. I don't think it's fair to people that deserve or may have their own ambition. I don't ever want others to believe that somehow I have skill or people in my that have reached this position have anything that is special. Anyone can. So let's use marathons. Let's just get something that we can both relate to. Mm-hmm. And I'll use Ironman in my case. I have people all the time like, I can't believe I can never do an Ironman. I can never. You probably have people, I can never run a marathon. Mm-hmm. That's not true. I could say
that's not true because I was that. I'm not just. I can't do it. I have zero. Like Jared ran a marathon maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
My business partner, I grew up with him, high school youth group. He and I started running together a little bit with another senior guy at one of the offices we worked at before. The most I ran was a 10K.
Yeah.
He went on to run a marathon. I remember thinking, I can't fathom, I cannot mentally understand why anybody would want to do that. Why you would want to do that. And then fast forward, I don't know how many years, at least 10, if not more. I started running really because I got COVID and gyms were closed, and I thought, do I have permanent damage to my lungs or not? So I went on a run, went on another run, and before I know it, I'm running a marathon. And I know what you're saying, like 26.2 miles. I did it. I was over 40 at the time when I started the process.
But you started by running 1 mile.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I wanted, to really
so anyone can be Jim Stewart.
There's no such thing as Jim Stewart. I mean, look, I'm just, and I mean sincerely.
Deflected the attention sufficiently.
I don't like it. I really, and I'm being sincere. It makes me uncomfortable.
I can sense that.
It's just simply not true. There's nothing redeeming. I'm on my journey. You're on your journey. Everyone's on their own journey, and they deserve to be equally celebrated. Mine maybe is more visible, and it's more physically expressed in buildings. But in no way does it deserve any more attention than people who are doing more important work. And I think that's where we've, in some ways, kind of lost our way. We want to, media has, informed us to celebrate these, individuals for, some success or things they've done. And, from musicians to, artists and DJ, I don't know what. I mean, every category seems to have people we want to hold out as being, an unattainable position they've achieved. And that's not fair to everyone else who could be the next person. There's what I'm hopeful of. Let's use, I know we're not in a common ship, but let's use any of the projects I leave behind. What I'm hopeful for is that the next generation, the next group of, that are coming up behind me to say, we're going to take the baton now, and we're going to play, records that are more current. And we're the next generation, that they could see what work we've left behind. They can learn from that work and do a better job. That feels right. And anything that works against that, and that's why I think this idolization and trying to hold people into this station because they've had some good outcomes is not fair to that generation that needs to know they too can do it. They should do it. What is required though is the doing part. You have to start. You have to run that first mile. You want to be a developer? Great. Here's some, I could tell people, go start here, go learn from this, go learn. And then guess what you have to do? Go buy a piece of dirt, right? Go meet with an architect, go plan, put something in the air, fail, do stupid things, make mistakes, learn, study from others, get a Doug Roberts in your life that can help you, learn where, the dead bodies come from. Right, and go, and then pick yourself back up, and go again, and go. It's just we've in some ways we've become a little bit lazy, and the easy answer is, well, if I can produce online content. I mean, some piece of research came across my desk, a few weeks back, and it was talking about the state of our youth and the education system, and the number one. Do you want to sense what the number one career path is for today's kids?
I mean, based on the background of the question, I'm going to say influencer.
Yeah, exactly. It is 100%. Yeah. And turn the tile. But that's what we're thinking about. I just want. People to.
That's another great example. I think it's probably easier to be a developer than to earn a living as an influencer.
It might be, but
constantly be putting stuff out there that people will connect with.
Yeah. So I look where I think the rubber hits the road for me is I don't want in any way to be culled out from the herd and said in any way the colors of my spots are different than anybody else's. They are not. I live the same way everyone else does. I have. Learned a lot from, I imagine you're so well read. I assume you've spent some time studying Stoicism and the teachings of, Seneca or Marcus Aurelius and others. And there's these great philosophers who've kind of laid the groundwork to help us all understand what, kind of a complete life starts to look like and how do we moderate the temptations that we're given through media and sales and others, and instead focus on, creating space. And when I think about creating space, I'm trying to work very hard at learning to live with less, so that I can make room for the things that I truly care about and the things that truly matter. And you start to connect the dots. Well, why do you have a company named Matter? Right? It serves as a symbol and a constant reminder to me that I have to check ambition at the door sometimes, because I do have a level of enthusiasm. Perhaps that's a little bit more, off norm, but. It's not the rewarding part of life. The
nice
rewarding,
way to say it.
The rewarding part of life to me is dinners with friends and having moments of solitude or meditations and just holding hands with my wife and if anyone thinks I have some sort of amazingly great sensationalized life, they should visit my wife and I on a Friday night at 6:30 when we're probably both in our pajamas and we just cooked dinner together and we're having maybe a bottle of wine, and not even a great bottle of wine, just a glass of wine, and playing Rummy Cube or watching a show or taking in the end of a day and just reflecting on the gift we were given today. And that's how I live. There's nothing more. But anybody could do that. And I think that's where we've lost. We have this. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of the hedonistic treadmill.
No.
Right. So the hedonistic treadmill is a kind of a construct of how we've been conditioned, mostly through marketing and also human behavior to acquire more. I will be happy when if I just get this and I get this, and you certainly have experience with this romantic idea of the new thing you get when I get that great car, get this house, and then
right.
I'm going to give myself permission.
I'll be happy when
So that and the hedonistic treadmill is this idea that you go acquire those things only to realize it didn't give you what you want, and then you're then conditioned like, oh, you only got the S class. Had you gotten the right, and so oh my gosh, I guess I have to work harder and harder. And the journey needs to start inside. Who are you, and who are the people that you love and care for, and how are you going to be true to them and to yourself? You made the comment about kind of the profile work you do. I actually find one that's I find more insightful is known as Johari window. So, and then
it's going to be the 8th one I do. What's it called?
Johari window. Okay. Literally named after a couple psychologists or others. One was named Joe and the other was Harry. That's how I learned it. When I was in school. But this is the idea was that if you just can't take an XY axis, then the 4 panes. Ideally, they would all be of equal size and relationship to one another. But that isn't how it works. In the Johari window, we're you're actually 4 people. Each one of us are 4 individuals. You are the version that other people see you as, right? No matter how much I want to be in your head, you have an impression of me that you think is me, right? So that's persona number 1. There's the persona that I want to put out there. This is who I want you to think of me as. Even as I'm trying to frame, it's a very authentic, genuine conversation. In the background, I'm trying to be careful. Like, don't say anything that makes you look, like a bigger idiot. And that's, so I'm also controlling what you, so I have a version that I want you to see, right? So that's person number 2. There's the version of me that I think you called it the mask, right? I also know the version of me that is me. The part of my life I don't share, the part of my life that I think, my fears, my hopes, my dreams, and then there's, this kind of unknown exploratory, true self. And what you learn through studying Johari is that when people are out of alignment, if the person I'm trying to present to you is not consistent with the person I actually am, it creates tremendous stress. And we pick up on that as a bullshit meter. Like, I hear what you're saying and the way you're trying to frame something, but for some reason, instinctively, I don't believe you. Or I feel like you're manipulating, or you're trying to steal my autonomy to do something you want out of it, or get something out of it. The most genuine, when we talked earlier in this conversation about grace, I think one of the things that really resonates me when I'm around people like that I can just really take inspiration from, they're living the version of themselves, and the version I see and the version they want you to see are very closely aligned. And I think that that liberates us to stop worrying about the opinions of others, and lets us to be, allows us to be comfortable to share a version of us that is real, that is authentic. And when you start to have those type of conversations and connections with other people, it becomes material. And my world now is to really make sure there's and it's not every day. It's hard, and it's not always true. But I work very hard to make sure that the person I'm presenting is the person who I am. That's why I think I react to this, this idea that, when did Jim Stewart become Jim Stewart? There aren't 2 different people. I've always been the same person. I've always been, have, hopes and dreams and aspirations. And, I'm always, I have fears. I have dark moments. I've had my own mental health struggles. I have all the trappings that would make people question their own journey and believe, unfortunately, that somehow they're not adequate. And that's why I think I work so hard to say, if that's not true, you are adequate. You are who you are, and celebrate your truth and live the life you want to live, while maintaining a certain level of integrity and values and alignment with what you hold to be kind of your moral compass. Those are non-negotiables. But beyond that, I just wish we could all get off this, this platform that somehow, we have an expectation of others and we're forcing our expectations on them, and society is forcing expectations. Your parents are forcing expectations. Maybe your religion is forcing expectations for you to become someone that's not you. And it's a grave injustice to the journey we're trying to take through life, because it's very temporary and it'll be over before we know it. And that's another big lesson that came out of this, exploratory phase of my life to understand what guidance would you give to somebody in the younger version of yourself. And consistently, one of the big qualifiers there is to live a life that's true to yourself, not the life that others expect of you. And I think, for any of your listeners or you or me or anyone else, if we start to ask how much of our day is dedicated towards presenting a version of us to line up with what others want to see, it's exhausting and it's mentally deteriorating. And it moves you further and further away from fulfillment, from purpose, from humility and vulnerability and empathy and compassion and all the kind of soft tissue words that I've come to hold out as endearing qualities of any person I know. I don't even know what your question was. We probably went down a bit of a rabbit hole.
This is how takeaways works.
Okay.
This is exactly how. When you were talking about the Johari window and the XY axis.
Yeah.
So it reminded me, so you came back to become a developer with Matter, and somebody that you and I both know sent an email out to his network, Alan Sklar.
Oh, okay.
And it said something to the effect of, my friend Jim Stuart, Central Properties, did all this stuff, and now he's back in Las Vegas. And in there was, as you could tell, I am in some descriptor like you would expect from an attorney, something like I'm an unapologetically, unabashedly fan of just something like that.
Okay, well.
You were probably in town a year or two, and I sent you an email. I actually read your website. Maybe it was right after you guys sent your website. I read through the whole thing. I sent you an email, something to the effect of, Alan Sklar raves about you. My father-in-law does too. On one of your next visits, I'd love to grab coffee. I've got no agenda. And you wrote back saying, great. And we went to Samba Latte. I was expecting, one of these introductory getting to know you type meetings that would last anywhere from a half hour to an hour, because you were giving me your time and I had nothing to offer back. I was just saying, I'd like to get to know you. And it was a 90-minute conversation. And in that, you also drew a graph. I don't know if you remember. It was the river of change is what you talked about.
Oh, you must
remember this?
You would mean the transition river.
The transition river.
Yeah.
I remembered it as the river of change.
Yeah.
The transition river. And it started with a quadrant, and we're talking about brokerage, because you have experience with that with Stuart Mixer. And here I am in part of my journey, and I've got a brokerage. And I've seen this quadrant before, where you've got your high culture, high producer person on one side, and then your low culture, low producer, and the other variants of that. And what you do with each of these, high culture, high producer, get out of the way, anything they need.
Or
great.
Woman, yeah.
Someone who's high culture but a low producer, not so easy. What do? You try to coach them up on being a producer. Someone who's low culture, high producer, you said public hanging.
That's right.
The person that's making you the most money but is eroding your culture, you kick them out of your office, you call a standing huddle, you dramatize it. That person that makes us all this money but makes everyone's life miserable, they're out. We just got rid of them. It's a public hanging. So that was one of the takeaways that you shared with us that Jared and I still talk about pretty frequently. Another thing that came to mind is the way takeaways works, this whole thing of takeaways, and why did I do this, and why am I doing this? And it's something about me that actually an agent in our market named Jen Levine held up the mirror once. We were working at NAI together. I was the managing director. She was an agent. She went to a summit or something and came back. And before I could ask her, she said, I already know what you're going to ask. What are the takeaways? And I thought of 3, and I'm going to share them with you. And she did me an enormous favor. 360 feedback, people telling you how they perceive you is helpful. And that was one of those moments. I didn't ask her to do it. It was a gift. And I was like, you're right. I do always look for the takeaways. I'm sitting at a NAOP breakfast, and it's the government affairs update. They talk about what happened at the legislature, and it's like, it couldn't be more boring to me. It's not my thing. And even then, I will sit there and we'll say, okay, what can I learn from this experience? The moderator's charismatic. I like his style. This person is just talking over my head. So if I'm ever that person, there's a takeaway there. There's something there. And couple years ago, maybe a year ago, you hosted the SIOR, another real estate association, lunch at Uncommons. One of the office buildings was still in shell condition.
Okay.
So you brought in tables, you brought in catering, you had a speaker and a microphone. And the whole point of this was so we could tour the project. It's a hard hat tour. We had reflective vests on.
Yeah.
And after the show that you created for everybody, and you had the poet, spoken word poem.
Yeah.
Poem was read, the Uncommons poem.
Right.
Which we could do another takeaway about. But before we all went on this tour, you said something. You said this is all good and fun, and we're excited about this project and excited for you to see it. Do not forget this is a live construction site. And there are people driving heavy equipment out there. And when you're crossing the streets, don't assume that they see you. And in fact, do not cross the street until you have made eye contact with the driver. And so here I am in this moment of my life thinking, great, I'm at a real estate project tour thing. And you say this thing. And then I'm in my running journey now. Fast forward.
Okay.
And I'm running all over around my house, the streets of Summerlin and other parts of Las Vegas on longer runs. And how often this takeaway shows up in application. If I'm running here and a car is going to make a right turn, they're looking to their left to see oncoming traffic, and how often they just go out without looking back to their right.
Right.
And how that takeaway has served me many a times. I will either go around or I will not go into the street until I literally will see them and wave, and they wave back.
Right.
That's how takeaways works. And it's you asked, you don't even know the question.
No, I don't know.
I'm rambling here.
But my agenda was just to make sure that nobody gets hurt on our job site. So I'm glad it's found its way into a lot of other parts of your life already.
Yeah, well, there was the Jahari window. There was I'm going to call it the River of Change forever.
Transition River.
River. And, look the driver in the eye. But that's all a segue for us
so
to go into. You've given me many. I mean, that's just a couple. To go into Uncommons.
Okay.
And I want to talk about this project, Uncommons, which on paper, it's a mixed-use project on 40 acres that has 500,000 square feet of office, about 90,000 square feet of curated retail. Mm-hmm. I can't call it retail because it's curated retail.
Right. It's more than just retail.
At 800 apartment units.
Right.
But it's not just that.
So what started as a single piece, and when I first looked at it, I wasn't interested in just a single piece. But
single piece being what, 2.5 acres?
Nah, I think it was a little bigger than maybe 10, enough to get started. But the thesis around Uncommons was pretty obvious, I think, to me, which was Hughes Center, was on its way to becoming locationally obsolete.
So Flamingo and Paradise in Southern Nevada, this is 1 million plus square feet of what used to be the place to be for business, central business district.
Yeah, right.
And now it is because I would never want to drive there if I don't have to.
Right, and we knew that to be true. I used to office there as well, and so you just have to ask yourself, kind of, well, why are they still there? And it doesn't take a lot to figure that out. That there's no viable alternative. So, unlike when we did Central Point across the street, the prestige and cachet of a Morgan Stanley or a Deloitte and others. They require a certain quality of a project, that feels consistent with their corporate identity. Mm-hmm. And the reason I've concluded everyone was still in Hughes Center is that there was not a viable option. And so that kind of gave me the chance to learn lessons that I took from a collective of my own experiences from being a retail entrepreneur and what it meant to understand human experience design and how you can connect an emotional journey for people in a very systematic way, but also a genuine way. The lessons learned from my daughters on what it means to work for a place with purpose, work for a place that allows you to have engagement with your friends and is exciting and is a place you want to show up versus have to show up to. And so it was all these little things where voices were invading my head. And once my brother turned me on to real estate, I realized, okay, this is. If we could somehow amass enough real estate here to get some scale, this is where I can express all these, voices I can't quiet down and try and do something about it.
And so 10 acres became 40.
That's right. And it was not an easy, and a lot of people, Joe Kennedy among them, Joe sold me that first piece. And, kind of navigating this thing through the entitlement and the acquisition of all the adjacent parcels and getting this all together, taking it through the county and going through a rather complex urban village and high impact project and on and on and on. It took a lot of time, and I needed people to be patient with me. And there were many, and Joe Kennedy was among them, that said, I believe in what you're trying to do, and I'm going to be patient. Of course, we understand the transaction, so we paid along the way. But and I think in some ways, Hayim, that's where again my discomfort comes when people want to put like a person, in this case, individualized around me. It's simply just not how the world works. I mean, it took a lot of people, and to this day, it takes a lot of people their own willingness to kind of buy in. It takes people like Neville, one of the greater men you and I could ever know in our life, to say, I believe too, and I'm going to help. And that's where I think it's so. Where I think when people talk about me, I think it takes away from the honor to the people who really are on this journey. And it can't be a person; it's a collective. And so, long way to say, yeah, acquired 40 acres, assembled it, because I knew that's the corner.
So on that visit when we came for SIOR, Kelly was telling us a story about a little parcel of land that was owned by someone that was living in a nursing facility in California.
And she didn't know she owned it.
And she didn't know she owned it.
Right.
And it was like, well, if you don't get that piece,
we had nowhere to go.
You have no project. And you're already like
we are
going.
Deep.
I mean, the horse is out of the barn.
Yeah.
And you said to her,
you wonder why I stay, up late at night and wake up scared in the morning? These are the stories.
And so Kelly had to fly to visit this woman and explain to her, you own this and we want to buy it from you and we're going to pay you. What's the...
Yeah. So, and her name escapes me now, but she was probably, into her 90s. And so what happened is there was a piece of real estate that was acquired by the Department of Transportation when they were putting in the freeway. And so it was owned by NDOT, technically on the deed. But when they go to sell those remnant pieces back, there's a reversionary right that goes back to the person who originally owned it and sold it to them. And so they have the option to buy back the land at the price that the municipality, in this case NDOT, the jurisdiction was NDOT, or the agency was NDOT. Whatever they paid her for it, she had the right to buy it back at that same price. And now this had been 20 years ago, or however long ago. So you can imagine her distrust. She's a senior citizen, and here comes these people she doesn't know calling to say, "We'd like to buy your land." And she was consistently saying, "I don't own any land." Well, you kind of do. No, I really don't. And it took Kelly, who, let me look, the fact that I've gone this far without talking about Kelly, Lawson, is almost an embarrassment, because she has been my right hand and had made so many things in my life work correctly. By far and away the most valuable person I've ever been surrounded by, and to this day, I couldn't live without her and do anything professionally. So
she's got that remarkable quality. The best way I can describe it is the Dale Carnegie gene, like Neville has it, my father-in-law. Kelly has it too. I think I've met maybe 5 people that immediately just have that and make you feel totally comfortable, totally trustworthy. And I've spent some time with her and what she does, and you talked about this entitlement thing, and you sort of gloss over it, but when you hear it from Kelly and the process that it takes and what she does,
right,
it's just it's
inspiring.
It's another level. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. So we convinced Kelly, I should say, finally shared enough with this lady to say, okay, and we had to have a letter from the county and others. We tried to show that this is why you actually have a right, and you don't need. And she's, I have no interest in buying the property. We said, we don't think you want to, but we'll buy it and we'll pay you what it's appraised for in exchange for you giving us the right to acquire it. And we needed her kind of reversionary rights to come back to us. But literally, Kelly flew out. I think they brought a nothing bundt cake with them, and we flew our notary with her, and they sat in her apartment and or the senior facility, and they sat there with her for all afternoon and told stories. And eventually, as Kelly can do, reached a point of comfort to say, here's the clarity of what we have and what you have, and she effected the transaction. And
if not for that, no one comments.
And I think even in that case, there was no escrow. I mean, we literally handed her like a cashier's check and said, "Here you go, take it to the bank. You're good to go." And we took the reversionary rights. But it's interesting how projects like in Commons. I have 100 stories like that, 100 moments probably where it could have just come off its rails, and the least of which is something like COVID and others. But yes, so we.
All right, so you've got like 40 acres. A blank canvas, which in Las Vegas, it's not easy to acquire.
Right.
And you didn't just get 40 acres. You have it, or I believe Durango and 215 is main and main for Southern Nevada.
Right.
IKEA believes so also, and they've got smart people doing all sorts of statistical research. And they decided when they're coming to Vegas, they're across the highway from you. You're on the south side with Uncommons. And now you get to decide, wow, what are we going to put on this campus? And you could have done a lot of things, but you chose this project.
Right.
And it's not just like I talked about office buildings, retail, and multifamily. There's all sorts of work. I want you to talk about the work that you guys did to decide what you were going to express on this parcel.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we could do an entire episode on just that, but I'll try and synthesize it into a way that the best of those attributes and qualities are part of this conversation. So, first things first, for me is I want to make sure I'm surrounded by the Christian Davies of the world, the true intellects and creative thinkers that once you let them loose, magic seems to happen. And we went after a very specific individual by the name of Duncan Patterson out of L.A. Gensler's office. He leads the global practice, and the reason I went after Duncan is he's designed projects that I have admired for Rick Caruso's work for people that are in Southern California. He just finished the Village of Palisades, which was a remarkable project. He was doing Fifth and Broadway in Nashville for another group, and just the type of projects that I think when we travel and we see, we're like, wow, why doesn't that exist where we live or where we operate? So Duncan was the first time I had been interviewed by the architect. So Duncan flew out and said, "There's no way I'm drawing anything in Vegas," and so I said, "Well, just entertain me. Come on out. Let me tour you around and let's get to know each other." Lessons learned from previous mentors in my life, and let's just start with seeing if we like each other. And I said, the way to view this, Duncan, is first comes essence, then comes form. He's like, you're dropping this Buddhist crap on me or whatever. I said, so let's just spend some time. So he flew out, and we spent first half of a day together, and drove him to the normal projects you would think I would take him to. And at the end, we had 3 projects left. He said, "I don't need to see any more. This town needs me." And so he said, he was aghast at what we did. He's like, he literally was like, well, what the hell is it with the people in Las Vegas? You think you live in the Mediterranean? You live in the damn desert. Why isn't anyone honoring the native environment and what makes the Mojave so beautiful? You're building as if you live in Tuscany. What's wrong with you people? And he said, "You'll get me, but you have to commit to me that we're going to talk about materiality and a reflection of time and place and sustainability." Said that? Yes, he did.
Yeah. Okay.
And I said, Duncan, you're speaking my language, and I want to learn from you, and I will be your thought partner all the way through, and I'll allow you to do your best work. And your best work will be your vision of best work lined up with our vision of a commercial enterprise that is economically viable. And to liberate a creative like Duncan Patterson, really is a good place to start. And then we had a counterpart to him, a gentleman by the name of Daryl Fulbright, who leads the office practice for Gensler. So we kind of married up 2 disciplines. We knew we were at a workplace strategy first, but the placemaking would come from the mixed-use nature and the work that Duncan Patterson does. And then you start, and then you dream, and then you push and shove and debate and argue. And I kind of work off of kind of my guideposts are empathy, play, meaning, purpose, symphony, story, right? And so I put all these words up on kind of in our early charrette sessions and dropped them all around and said, this is what we're after, a place that speaks this language and design. And it was magic. I mean, that is the single most enjoyable part of any project for me is the charrette and the ideation. And
what's a charrette?
It's just when you start scratching around with a bunch of tissue paper and drawing with pens and not ink, not CADs, and you push, you shove, you draw massing, and you organize, and you literally will crumple shit up and say, well, this is nonsense, and let's start over, and let's tear out a new sheet, and let's draw again, and what about this, and how does this orientate over here? So you're in essence, you're just trying to throw all the ingredients onto into the kitchen, and then pretend that you're cooking until you find something that actually tastes good. And so in this case, you're organizing buildings and relationships between buildings. You're asking, what does the experience look like? What does the experience feel like? And which is our next point of departure. So look like, sense of place, Gensler, among the world's best. What does it feel like? Sense of belonging, not their forte. Mm-hmm. And for all the research and industry insight they provide around workplace strategy and research, when you go one layer deeper and say, well, how do we actually create belonging? How do we create connection? How do we create community? This is a new language that they weren't. While they could pay attention to it, it wasn't really their discipline. They're designers, and so I knew I had a problem. Problem's not the right word. I think I saw that there was an opportunity to learn much in the same way I did with Perch, where if you just reorganize the category and instead speak to our human desires rather than an economic desire. Mm-hmm. To me, I quickly differentiated this. This shouldn't be a place that people pay rent to go to an office. This should be a place where people feel privileged to show up every day because they're surrounded by like-minded. They are inspired by the environment. They are they're given these moments of serendipity or restoration or connection that in some ways we had an active role in instigating, and that kind of got me pretty excited. And so I went out and regrouped with some of the people I used with Perch around human-centered design or human experience design, and said, have you ever taken these this modality and this design thinking into a mixed-use project? And of course the answer was no, but everyone got excited, like, well, let's see how that shows up and what it looks like.
And so you're pioneering as you're going along.
I think so. Exploring is probably a better way to look at it, and just trying to see what sticks and what do we have permission to do, which is kind of a strange way to explain design thinking, but the way I kind of express that is, if you're queued up at an Apple store for the next release of the iPhone 16 or what have you, standing in line, and the Apple employees come out and hand you a bottle of water, they have permission to do that. It's consistent with the construct of, I'm at an Apple store, I'm in a line, and they gave me a bottle of water. If they come out and hand you, a perfectly braised lamb chop, you're going to say, these don't belong,
mm-hmm.
But you eat, and you might even like lamb chops. I mean, so there's certain things that fit within the organizational silos.
This is like symbols and signals that we have throughout our life. Like if you go to a grocery store, there's all sorts of signals and symbols that shortcut your decision making. The lamb chop example is kind of like if I'm standing outside waiting in line and a lamb chop shows up. It's outside of the patterns of acceptable.
Yeah, right.
I got.
So we use that in the frame of permission sets.
Yeah. Okay.
What is within the the expectations of someone showing up to their apartment or to meet friends or to show up to work, and what do the margins of that start to look like? And that's where we could play. But if someone showed up and it became whimsical, like I had a lot of people trying to push art and other things on us that belong in Area 15, not at a corporate campus. I don't have permission to go that far.
Gotcha.
So it's just a very careful eye on how do we innovate with a very select eye on where do we cross the divide to being whimsical and not relevant.
And so what are some of the things that are there now after this process? Like, for example, you get to name streets, and you could have named them whatever you want, but you guys decided to name them after, is it 4 or 5?
There's 5 different civic leaders.
5 different Nevada civic leaders.
Right. Unrecognized, often overlooked, particularly people of color or minorities or gender that simply for their place in time, they were doing the important work, but someone that shone brighter, was more public, perhaps undeservedly or not, got all the recognition. So back to my earlier comment, it's the unsung heroes, the people that do the selfless work for the right reasons. What a great opportunity we were given. So we partnered with the UNLV Department of History and did some research work with them to understand who these individuals might be and how they might be contacted. And then we cut it down to a small group that said, these are the people, these are the brilliant contributors to this community that we want to honor.
And so somebody not part of the design process or not at the presentation ceremony that you did for the 5 people or their families that wouldn't know that. What other discoveries are at Uncommons that somebody might not know about that would be, once they know about it, they say, yeah. That's cool. Because that is cool.
That is cool. Yeah, well, I think it's in some way it's what we should all be doing is a little more intention. I've had enough projects where we've flipped through a catalog and picked art because it was in a budget, and I thought, okay, that's great. On to the next. So what you'll start to see showing up now is a certain level amount of street art, which to me is part of the aesthetic and texture of a real urban kind of landscape. But it's just not enough to put up art. We try and make sure that the messaging for that piece, right when it shows up in your kind of journey through Uncommons, is relevant to where you are and what you might be doing, kind of activity-based inspiration. So if you go into like one of our main parking garage, sexily, it's named PS1. But right when you pull into that garage, we have this wonderful work done by a local artist, and it says "You belong," and that there's a lot of intention put behind that, and we actually design these moments around the campus to say, what do we want people to feel when they first come in? So when you first pull into our main parking garage, PS1, you're going to see a couple of things that that we're speaking to the unconscious mind, kind of to set a level of safety and inspiration. So very first thing on to the left is a security office that's built with glass. And I forced it to be made out of glass so that as you're driving in, you can see security officers and monitors, and to help you know we take your safety with high importance. And we have applied and made it front and center. Safety, got to keep you safe. Might not cue, consciously, but non-conscious, your brain's saying, okay, this place is safe. And then you make the right into the garage, and the very first thing you see this giant wall mural that says "You belong." So you're safe, and we welcome you here, regardless of who you are, your backgrounds, where you came from, your loves and loss, whatever might be influencing your life. We're glad you're here. And you'll see that throughout the entire property. And now we're taking it to the next level with little quips that will show up in the right spot to kind of inspire you on the moment of that day. If you're walking back to your apartment, and it'll be a little a great quote from Maya Angelou or others that says, how was this day? The home is the restorative space, and just to cue you like, oh yeah, I'm walking home. And when you're walking into an office building, there's going to be moments of kind of career inspiration and finding truth in the journey you're on through your own professional career. So a lot of little details, and then there's things that you don't really see, little Easter eggs. There's certain sayings that show up on the concrete only when it rains. So we were trying to take people out of this. Everything is so easy. I can get whatever I want off my phone today, and I can control kind of my day. I can summon a car. I could have food brought to here while we're working. You can't make these quips show up unless it rains, right? So we wanted to give this, the expression of surprise and delight, where we could do the unexpected. And now, starting next, they start next week. They'll be installing. So when you mentioned the poem, that was done by Miss A.V., and she wrote 12 haikus of what it means to be uncommon, and it's soundly and foundationally based around our differences among each other, and the commonality that gives us to do great things, the importance of community, the importance of making an impact in Las Vegas. So all those are going to show up now throughout the quad area, the courtyard area, but they're not obvious. Some of them might be discovered under a table. One might be very obvious, and we wanted to make this kind of Easter egg journey of sorts to say, do you know where all 12 are? And they'll show up in surprising ways. One might show up only if it rains, but the secret will be, can you tell me where all 12 are? And we're going to design some sort of kind of reward system that if you can go into Amelie, into our community office, say, I have a picture, I know where all 12 are, they look like this and they say this, and you have the poem now situated, that we've done something to kind of recognize that effort. And again, is that for everybody? Of course not. I mean, is that for even the majority? Of course not. Can we think creatively? Can we let people know that our intention was to create these moments that are not only unexpected, but I hopefully telegraph to visitors at Uncommons that we didn't just do the easy part. We tried to do the part that gives you a connection or inspiration to a property that creates belonging. And these are kind of, again, back to the lessons we took out of the human experience design firm and the work that they led us through.
And so you're sitting here and you're spending a lot of time with me. So first of all, thank you for that. The more significance is that you're sitting here and you're probably going to leave here going back to Uncommons because tonight you're opening the Sundry, which is the food hall.
Correct.
Is that the curated retail or is that part of the curated retail?
Everything is curated.
So what are some of the things that are there that are cool also?
Well, first of all, this is when we say curated, it's a buzzy word that I don't think, but we use it. So, but what does it mean? And so let's use, nail salons. We've forever wanted a nail. I personally have walked into probably 15 nail salons in this town, and went and explored to try and say, is this the type of entrepreneur we want to have at Uncommons? And so that's what curated means to us. Is every single space has been singularly discussed, organized, and vetted out to say who belongs here and what it is and how do we go find them. So let's use Salt and Straw. So I don't know if you know anything about Salt and Straw. You're kind of a West Coast. Salt and Straw is the bane of my existence. They have an amazing reputation with my daughters. And I was forced to, throughout their childhood, to go stand in line, all summer long for 30 minutes because they had to have Salt and Straw. I knew we needed to have Salt and Straw at Uncommons. They were not in the market. I found the owner. Her name's Kim Malik. She lives in Portland. She is the one who originally came up with this artisanal hand-scooped ice cream and these unique flavors and done in a way that is art. And I called Kim. I said, I need you, to be part of this. And all those lessons that we've previously discussed about patience and making sure you have value. And I just told her, she said, well, I'm not in that market. I said, I understand that. But what I do want you to know is when you're ready, this is the place definitively where you'll want to show up first. And then for the next 3 years, I sent her pictures of me and my daughters in line at her different venues. And said, I just want you to know I'm still thinking about you and I'm ready when you are. Over and over, always polite, always complimentary, always sincere. And eventually she said, I want to come out and look at Vegas. And it took me 4 years for an ice cream store that's less than 1,000 square feet. But it's the right one. And I think that's what I want. If anybody picks up anything at Uncommons as it starts to go is to celebrate these amazing entrepreneurs and people like the Speakeasy Candle. Alicia, the first I told, when Frank Volk brought in this idea of a Speakeasy Candle, I said, well, tell me more. Has she done this before? No. Okay. So you want me to give up this prime piece of real estate? And he goes, and to Frank's credit, said, you just have to meet her. And I've met Alicia and I was overwhelmed with this intelligent, passionate, female-led business where she just said, here's what I want to do and here's why it's important. And she has no credit. She's not experienced. I think 99% of the peers, the Brookfields, the GDPs and others would say there's no possible way. And our approach was, no, we're going to give everyone a chance who shares our values, who can, thinks about community, thinks about connection. And we've been with, our hits and misses. It's super hard. And all these tenants I have tremendous empathy for because they signed on to that. COVID comes along, right? Hugely disruptive. Then, supply chain hits, then inflation hits, then. And, I've spent more time with my arm around their shoulders and holding people up and saying, it's going to be okay. We're going to help. We're going to get through this together. Sometimes it's hard. It's okay. I'm with you. Let's go. And I find it immensely rewarding to me to then see them, blossom into these, great businesses. But some don't make it too. We have, one or two, local coffee shops that, when costs started running up, they're like, tapped out. So, okay. That's a risk I took, and that doesn't mean it's the wrong path. No, we keep going. But back to the Sundry. So let me tell you what culinary magic looks like. So when I first started with the Sundry, how about that?
Culinary magic.
I just made that up as I was going
for this one.
So when we started construction, we always knew we had designed, of course, in with a food hall, not knowing anything other than I like food, and I've been to a lot of food halls. So we designed this place, and lo and behold, Frank Volk, gets a call from the MENA Group saying, hey, we see that you've started this project. We'd like to talk to you about it. We have a couple concepts.
Mina Group is Michael Mina that had the restaurant at Bellagio and certain other places.
Yeah, so Michael Mina had Michelin starred, 45 restaurants around the world. Probably one of the more.
He's got credit.
Yeah, he has credibility, and so I fly out thinking, okay, we're going to meet with the Mina Group, and ask Frank, so well, how many are we expecting? And and he goes, I don't know. It could be a few, could be many. I said, well, now does that include the chef? Probably not at this level. And, okay, well, let's start by making introductions and see if we get a relationship with
Essence
folks.
first.
Essence first. Yeah, that's just your quick study. And lo and behold, only one person shows up, and it's Michael Mina. And
how about that?
Yeah, how about that? And I one of my very first kind of true white tablecloth chef driven experiences with it was at Aqua, which is his Michelin starred restaurant in San Francisco. So to me, like, wait, so the founder of Aqua, this restaurant operator that is travels the globe, that's who I'm now going to spend some time. So I was a bit awestruck with just having Michael Mina there. But then, it goes on, and I think the chef and I spent probably 2 hours together, just sitting in a room, just like this, across from one another, talking about life. He had relocated out of San Francisco, took his team and moved. He's living in Southern Highlands, and obviously had a long history in Las Vegas on the Strip. But now that he was here, he's like, I don't understand why the local community doesn't have access to the same type of expression of food and experience and fit and finish that all the tourists get to enjoy. Because I've long wanted to do something for this in the suburbs, but there's never been a property that is consistent with the experience on the plate that is expressed on the buildings outside. So I said, this is it. Because I've been following it, and now here we are. And we really had this deep dive about what we can do, and what is the culinary scene that exists just below. And we've talked about this at Spring Mountain. I mean, all these great chefs are exiting the Las Vegas Boulevard, where you're just serving an ungrateful tourist, on an expense account over and over, and it's high velocity, it's high pressure, high speed. But it's not why most of these chefs got into the business. They got into the business because they're hospitality driven. They want the connection with people. And Michael championed it and said, I'm going to open my Rolodex, and I'm going to bring in the people that should express their talent in a way that doesn't show up in the suburbs. So now the Sundry, which officially we have now announced, or I should say, Mina has announced, will open June 12th to the public. And inside that building is a culinary miracle. There are the most passionate chefs. There's this. I spent the last 2 days with a chef by the name of Shotari Kamayo. He is from Berkeley, California, where before that he grew up and trained in Tokyo. In the Bay Area, Sho is his name. Whenever you have like a 3-letter name, you're pretty badass. You've crossed the chasm of relevance. So Sho is one of the most talented and passionate, purveyors of all things, Japanese, principally seafood and sushi and omakase and all the things that kind of make his talent show. That guy is now down the street, and he's at the food hall with Mizunara, and he is breathtakingly beautiful person with a talent that I've never seen before. A mere 50 feet away from him is Chef Ray Garcia out of Los Angeles with BS Taqueria, who is one of the most excitable, in culinary speakers to what I would call Angelino Mexican style food. There's a little bit of a twist, to the Mexican influence inside of Los Angeles versus maybe Mexico. And he's handed me a couple of these hand built wood fired tacos where they make their own tortilla, and each bite, like, it is impossible that I can have one in my left hand, a nori hand roll from Sho, and on my right hand I can have a braised pork wood fired hand built taco from Ray Garcia, and those two can exist in my hand at the exact same time. And there's just nothing like this. And then outside that, there's another 14 venues, from Dabaji to Cowbird and a bar oysterette. And I mean, if we are correct, this will become the central feature to everyone's weekend on how they choose where they're going to go eat and where they're going to go meet friends. And when you start to look at the collection of restaurants in Amari, and we don't even talk about Al Antico Vinayo, and that's Joe Bastianich, one of the most famous sandwich restaurants in the world. and their first outpost. They have one outpost in the United States, and it's New York. The second one is Uncommons. I mean, these are remarkable, kind of culinary moments for this community, and it's all going to exist in this, incredibly romantic, well-designed, well-conceived, incredibly safe, well-lit, aesthetic that should inspire for evenings. So when you think about when I say curation, and I talk about the food, and I talk about sundry, in many ways, I just did what I was trying to do for my children to create a memory-making factory with a home. I like to believe, this is now just coming to me top of my head, having this conversation, that Uncommons for generations will become the memory-making factory for the community. And I say that with a great dose of humility, by the way, because it's the talent that's there, not my talent. It's the Minas and the Shows and the Ray Garcias and the Joe Bastianiches and their work that I could sit back and imagine and take great pride, frankly, from the work the team did out there, knowing I could promise you over the course of the next 5 years, you're going to have dozens of moments where you're going to maybe have a little bit of shortness of breath and just say, this is my neighborhood, this is my community, and I'm with others and they're enjoying themselves. We're in this incredibly romantic setting that feels like it belongs here. And that's an important part, because I think even the work I did at Town Square, where the architecture speaks to a melange of design periods and looks and feel. I have nothing against downtown Summerlin, but it's a mall, with in some of steel and glass, and is that community? I don't. That's for other people to assess. But what I do think shows up inside of Uncommons, and particularly in the Quad, which is a nod towards how we used to live in college. I call it a campus because in many ways when I think of Uncommons, it's not a mixed use project, it's a campus. And when I think about that kind of time in my life, it's when I was most inspired. I would be intellectually curious. I'd have great speakers that would come and entertain. I had great social connection. I was able to be a part of subgroups that had shared interests, be it a running club or a fraternity or the finance department or others. So that informative journey in our life, to me, and I think many others, was probably the most expressive time in my life and the most growth in my life. Why can't the workplace be that? Why can't the place we gather with our friends and family feel collegial, feel connected with others in a way that says we're all in this together? Now, we don't have a mascot, we don't have a run and rev or these things, but we could say this is our community and look at what we have and give everybody a certain sense of pride to say, to drag their friends and family from out of market and say, you think you're all that just because you live in Orange County? Let me show you what it can look like in Las Vegas. And that, to me, is what I hope people take away from the work that's being done out there by all these amazing entrepreneurs and food makers and visionary designers and the people behind the multifamily, all these other things. What I hope at the end is that people walk away and say, we're very, very proud that this project, its ethos around shared experiences, around inclusion, around connection and belonging, in some way, it makes a small dent at changing what I believe is the current trajectory around loneliness, around toxicity, around divisiveness, around mental health issues. I find it, immensely overwhelming that statistically today, 17% of high school teenage girls, 17%, nearly 1 in 5, have either attempted or have seriously contemplated suicide. If that doesn't weigh on all of us, and to say, what are we going to do about that? And it's not a trend that just is inching up. It's up 70% over the last 10 years. So we're on a horrible plane here where we're spending time looking at our screens and not looking at one another. And here you and I are for 2+ hours here, and we've been eye to eye, nose to nose, a mere 2.5, 3 feet away from each other, and it's empowering. Right? It's connection. And that's what we're after, is can we create a place where we have an active role in instigating those moments of connection, allowing people who otherwise might feel not accepted to feel accepted. The very name and the nature around our branding and the work I did on Uncommons was to, much in the same way matter telegraphs to me, make sure that I'm making time and space for the things that are truly important. Uncommons is a nod to tell the community the very fact that we're all different from one another, the very fact that we're all on our own journey is what uniquely ties us all together. It's what should bind us in a way to say, I'm going to celebrate you, the real you, the authentic you. And you don't have to hide here. You could show up and express yourself for whatever your values are, and whatever your belief, whatever your orientation, whatever your color, whatever is who you are, you belong.
I think we just wrap it up right there.
I don't have
but part of what I was going to ask you is, and you already answered it, so I'll just ask it rhetorically. You're a developer. That's your core business as it relates to Uncommons. And there's a development process that you follow. And everything you did around Uncommons doesn't fully align with a development process. It more mirrors a creative process, which you really kind of laid out. But really, a developer develops a project for a return on investment, a return on whatever the measurement is, but it's really a return. And you start peeling back all these things that you did and the journey that you went on. And at the end of the day, it's like someone can easily ask, just put up the buildings, get them leased, do your thing and move on. Why do all this? But you really answered all that.
Yeah.
As far as the why.
Yeah. And again, it's my journey and my team's journey. And this is what we think is, feels good.
My journey. It's my project. I'm doing what I want to do.
Well,
if I want a poet, I get a poet.
And that's right. And I don't think we have to apologize for that. It doesn't have to apply to everybody. I don't live under this preconception that everyone's going to show up to Uncommons and fall in love. I expect that there's going to be detractors, people that show up and say this is nonsense, and I just want to go to a Shake Shack, and that's fine. That's their journey. I believe there's enough people that are like-minded that will connect and resonate with the message and the ethos and the work we're doing around community and trying to be at the forefront of the conversations of the community and things like the assembly that we're putting up. There's no reason to build a 5,000 square foot conference center in an office project, but we did. Why did we? Because we don't want the voice to dampen. We want to make sure that we have a platform where we can invite in people to continue the conversation long after we're out of the picture. I'm nothing more than the steward of this property. Soon enough, when these restaurants and everything else kind of opens up, I'm handing it over, and it belongs to the community. After that, we are just the gatekeeper to make sure it doesn't get screwed up.
Well, it's tremendous. Is there any final takeaway you'd like to share and leave all of us with? Could be about Uncommons or anything else.
No. Look, I think I've said way too much, and by now there's probably only like 2 people left listening because this would have been exhausting. So I'll give you another, just my last kind of truth of when I lived in Las Vegas and what I think other people might experience and what we should do about it. So, living out here for 20 years and all 3 of my daughters were born here, and I always felt a certain insecurity about saying I lived in Las Vegas. And I think it really originates from my fear of outside opinions and like, oh, you're raising your children in Vegas. And, I think we all kind of experience that to some extent. And, that's real. And I don't think, we should just hide and like, oh, no, no, it's tough to convince the world that Las Vegas is a community built on family values because reputationally, you're fighting the LVCVA who wants to say what happens here. So the messaging people have is that this is Sin City, and it supports debauchery and behavior that is unbecoming to how we, which is nonsense because the very people that are coming here performing and behaving that way are from those communities. It's not the locals. I find that ironic. But here's the thing. I think Las Vegas is in this amazing kind of nexus and moment where we're finally seeing a level of credibility and kind of shaking off this honky-tonk expression of what Las Vegas is to what Las Vegas can become. And this is our moment. And I think for people that are wondering, do we have to accept status quo? My answer is don't. For the people that are wondering what they can do, I'd say just go do it. Do something. Let's start advancing the interest of this community and dealing with the hard issues like education and others and infrastructure and trying to make a difference. This town needs leadership. It needs that next generation. I'm getting too tired. I'm probably already too old. So I would say anybody that's trying to do good work, consider us to be a resource. I'll share any of our information, any of the work we've done, any of the research we've done. And let's all kind of get in the boat together and see what this town can look like in 10 years. Because the fundamentals are beyond what any community I'm familiar with in perhaps the world can point to. From NBA to Major League Baseball to the Sphere to Formula One to this to that. I mean, these are remarkable economic stimulators coming into this town that will diversify and create an awareness that this town has never enjoyed. Let's do something about it, and let's do something about it together.
Well said. I'm from here. I'm born here. I never had a problem saying I live in Las Vegas because that's all I've ever known. But one of the observations I have about this city is a guy like Jim Stuart could come here because it's the only place he'll get accepted, or a first generation English as a second language, mildly dyslexic, barely got into. I didn't get into UNLV actually. I was not accepted, so I went to CSN for a bit. Then I got transferred there, and I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right, trying to make an impact just like you. But that's available to anybody. I think that Las Vegas puts that on offer for anybody. So
I agree with you.
Great point to end with. I know that this has been a big ask of you to be here. You got a lot of important work to do. So thank you, Jim.
My appreciation. I'm grateful for the work you're doing. This is good.
Thank you for listening. I would love to hear from you about your takeaways from this episode. Make sure to leave us a comment or leave us a review. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can hear future episodes as they come out. My name is Hayim Mizrahi. Tune in next time.